Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is the fifth part of What If Issei Was Never Resurrected. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like the video. Also share this video with your friends. Let's start the video. World of the Guardians. Issei and his team were now in another training campaign. A group consisting of himself, Rainer, Irina and Zenobia were right now involved in another fight with the golems. It was their 4-man group against 30 of them. In opposite to the beginning of their training, however, where even one of the liveless clay bodies was somewhat of a challenge that alone because of their regeneration ability. But now they were cutting through their opponents like weed. Irina just cut another one in half. The chestnut-haired exorcist was using her new learned ability in key manipulation, negating the regeneration of the golem. Beside that, she and her partner had also been given some additional parts of equipment. For example, a new improved fighting gear that Zenobia was wearing. This one was actually a very special design. Its structure was based on the infamous symbiote species that existed in Universe 001 and some other realities. This race consisted pretty much of a thick liquid black or reddish colored mass that could shape itself into many possible forms and normally bounded itself to an intelligent living host of any possible species, living off on their emotions, especially their aggressions. The suit itself that the exorcist was wearing was not alive in any way. But its material and characteristics were based on the creature's abilities. The tissue could not only regenerate itself if damaged, but also directly followed the mental orders of its carrier. Right now, part of it had taken the form of a shield on Zenobia's left arm that protected her from their opponent's attacks. On her wrist was a small device that connected the material directly with her mind. Irina, however, had declined as she had been offered such a suit. She had been calling it freaky. Calawarner's reaction had been in a similar way but a lot milder, as she had been shown some of the prototypes. Donasek, on the other hand, had been interested and had as well taken one for himself. Beside that, Issei and Rainer were now carrying other, a bit similar looking, devices on their underarms, that however served a completely different purpose. It connected them to the Guardian's interdimensional transport system and allowed all of them to conjure and open a portal at will. Even if they were not able to do it by their own powers, yet. And very soon, they had been told, they would receive even more equipment and weapons. In this moment, Issei was standing back to back with Rainer and Irina, while the golems were once again trying to surround them. Issei remembered what had happened between them all 1 week ago. XXXXXXX 7 days earlier. I think it is now on you to respond, Rainer had said to them. Issei was a little stunned, he admitted. Rainer, he thought, you sneaky deceptive. I will make it a bit easier for you, she interrupted his thoughts. And turned into the form of Yuma. Issei-kun, please come to me, Rainer said to him sweetly, her voice sounding exactly like on their date, and reached out with her hand. I love you. And in opposite to what she might have said in the beginning of their relationship, he knew her words to be true. Yuma. This was the same girl who was his first girlfriend, his first date, the girl he had fallen in love with. But at the same time, she was the fallen angel Rainer. Still, during the last week, he had started to see Rainer in another light as well. She began to lay her arms around him. And on top of that, Irina was standing right next to her, with pretty much the same expression on her face, and Yuma was as it looked all too willing to share. Come on, Issei-kun, she said, have you not told me a week ago that you wanted to fondle my breasts? Now is your chance. He was still standing there, as if he was somehow unable to move even a single limb. Issei, your hands on my boobs, where they belong, now, Yuma practically ordered him. Before Issei even fully knew it, he had been moving forward and was now holding Yuma's breasts. Irina was standing right next to them, looking as if she wanted to join in, but still hesitated. He let his hands glide over Yuma's breasts, grabbed them, stroked and caressed them. He had dreamed for long of actually doing this with a girl's boobs. And the fallen angel even seemed to let out a quiet mourn. Issei, she said. But then suddenly he was starting to feel cold like ice. Will you die for me? It shot through his head, again. Damn it, he thought. He felt himself moving backwards, his arms leaving hers. The look on his face turned into one of pain. Issei. Rainer asked now. I am sorry, he said. I am the one who is sorry, Rainer said. I am the one who has caused this in the first place and I promise we'll do anything to help you. Kun, please don't leave us like that, Irina told him. I am sorry, he just repeated. He turned around and started to move away. Great job issei. Real smooth, he thought to himself a moment later as he was walking through the corridors, running away from two girls who love you and who were literally throwing themselves at you. Even if one of them is your killer. But you had already decided to forgive her, didn't you? So why are you running away now? Don't be so hard on yourself, partner, he heard Diedrag's voice. A trauma like yours is not easy to overcome. Believe me, I have seen men who thought they were invincible dealing with such a thing worse than you do. You mean some of your past hosts? Issei questioned. Not only them. The dragon replied. No, not just them. It had not been easy. By far not, he remembered. Being defeated along with Albion by the leaders of the three factions stripped of his body and sealed inside this sacred gear. Imprisoned, very likely for all eternity. It had taken him centuries to truly accept this. Even harder to accept had been another fact, that it had served him right. He and the White Dragon had been fighting each other without any restraint back then, with absolutely no consideration for all the other creatures that were weaker than them, only caring about winning. A single missed attack could have caused global devastation. Their fight could have so easily destroyed their world many times over. It had taken him a long time and many humbling experiences, much of it trapped with hosts who cared about nothing than to use his power for their own interests, to realize just how selfish and arrogant they both had been. XXX Issei was still walking through the corridors of the incredible large complex, and this wing of the mansion was practically empty. He went outside and decided to take one round around the building. After a minute, he suddenly heard noises coming from around the corner. But he didn't really pay it any mind and just continued on his way. He was sunken too deep in his own thoughts. Still, what he saw as he moved around the corner surprised even him. It was Donasek and Kalawarner. He was holding her up against the wall. Her purple jacket was opened and her large breasts were hanging out for all, in this case him, to see. Her slip was pulled down and hanging on one of her legs, that she had both wrapped around his body, while he had his pants pulled down and was thrusting into her in a quick pace. Through both their movements, her very small skirt was lifted up in a nearly regular rhythm and Issei got a good look at part of Kalawarner's naked ass, and even of her pussy and the male fallen angel's dick pushing inside her. Normally a sight like this would have more than excited him, but he was too surprised to even react. What in the world are you two doing? He stammered. What do you think it looks like, boy? Donasek replied. Kalawarner tried to say between moans, you see. I had just realized that I never really thanked Donasek here for defending me after our comrade betrayed us. So after Gabriel's little show was over, I offered to show him my gratitude. You call this, showing someone your gratitude? Issei asked, trying quite unsuccessfully to suppress a perverted grin. Yes, oh yes. She answered, interrupted by her own gasps and moans, while Donasek continued to fuck her. By the way, I remember you played a great role in saving me as well, she suggested. Would you like a round on me too? If what this girl in the recording said is true about the size of your manhood, I wouldn't say no. You slut, Donasek commented dryly as he thrust into her once again. But, if I think about it, Rainer would not be very happy if I slept with her boyfriend, before she had her turn, right Issei? So maybe another time then. She grinned. I will leave you alone then. See you later, Issei said quite distraught, and turned around to leave. He felt hotter and hornier now than ever before that he could remember, having just gotten a major look at Kalawarner's large opie in her ass and on top of that seeing actually her being fucked. A part of him, a very large part, had wanted nothing more than push Donasek aside and take his place. Right now his mind was literally being swarmed with boobs and sex. What the hell was he doing? He asked himself. Just a few meters back there had been two great-looking girls who actually loved him offering themselves to him, and he had been running away. So what if one of them had killed him? Rainer, Yuma had already offered to make up for it. And he would make sure that she will. Issei's mind was making loops at the thought what he would be doing with Rainer for the rest of the night. As he had, a minute later, returned to the spot where he had left the two girls behind, they were still standing there, looking both a bit uneasy. Well, it was not every day that a pervert was running out on you when you asked him to have sex with you. Yuma, he called out as soon as he saw her, the eyes of both girls turning to him. He threw his arms around her and pushed her against the wall behind her, and started to kiss her hard. Rainer, he said. Issei realized that he had her in the same position he had seen Kalawarner in, a few minutes ago. Good. Very good. He let his hands wander over her body for a few moments, opened the buttons of her blouse, so that her breasts and her bra became visible. Then he placed one of them on her butt, grabbed it a bit, which caused another moan coming from her, and began to pull her slip down. He was actually thankful that the clothes she was wearing, the same as on their date, included a miniskirt, easy access and all. Of course what she was wearing in her true form was probably even easier. He realized that he himself had become so hard that it was getting painful. So he opened his trousers. Irina had a sad look on her face that he was so far only paying attention to Rainer. She was about to make a step forward to join them, but was then still too shy to do that, and was then beginning to turn around to leave the two lovers by themselves. Damn it, she only thought. Stop. She heard Issei's voice just as she was about to leave. Where do you think you are going? She wanted to say something. Instead she saw how he reached out his hand and drew her closer to both of them. Issei. What are you doing? Irina asked. Remember, he said, I am a wild beast of sexual desire, repeating the words of the other Irina from the recording, and I want you both to satisfy me. Oh okay, she replied, trying very unsuccessfully to hide the fact that there was nothing she would rather do than that. Issei placed Irina right next to Rainer, draw her into a kiss and touched both of them alternately. Issei took his member out completely and let his pants fall down. Rainer only grinned. I will do it now, he said to Yuma, as he positioned himself in front of her. I see this Kiryu girl wasn't exaggerating, she commented as she got a good look at what he had been hiding in his trousers. I guess I will have this inside of me in a few moments, right? She now wrapped her legs around him and crossed them behind his back. You guess right, Issei commented. He placed himself at her entrance and pushed forward. A small part of him wanted to ram it into her as hard as he could, hurting her like she had hurt him. Another one just wanted to hold her in his arms. The greatest part, however, just wanted to play with her body the entire night, and that was exactly what he was going to do. For the beginning he started to move slow. For a moment he saw a visible painful wince on her face, but it passed very quickly. Now, how does my pussy feel like Issei-kun? She whispered to him teasingly a moment later. Great. It feels great, he replied. So tight and warm. Issei admitted he felt like in heaven. I didn't know that a bitch can feel so good inside, he commented a bit sharper, his anger at her taking a hold once again. This caused a painful look from her for a quite different reason. I am sorry, he said a moment later. I told you, don't say this. We both know, what I did was unforgivable. That you are even giving me a chance is. She suddenly moaned. If I remember right, you are just in the process of fucking me right now. So let us continue. She smirked now, having obviously returned to her usual self. He started to move inside her once again, giving her another few thrusts. By the way, Kun, Rainer grinned at him, now that you have stabbed your spear into me, too, doesn't it means we are even now? She asked him suggestively. You are so vulgar, Irina yelled at her, partly out of embarrassment and part out of jealousy. Says the girl who wants nothing more than be in my place, the fallen angel commented. Irina hesitated a bit. Yes, please Issei, do me too. Right now. I just can't take it anymore. Take what? Rainer asked playfully. You know that exactly, Irina growled. This is your fault. You are the one who had been riling me up and teasing me the entire time. And now you are the one who is being. Oh, you mean the holy warrior, is horny like hell, she asked. Yes, god damn it, she called out. Oh father, please forgive me for sullying your name, she chanted a moment later as she fully realized what she just said. Okay Issei-kun, I think you should pay some attention to Irina now. She has truly earned it with her patience, Rainer stated and gave him a short kiss. When you are at it, you can also compare how a good girl feels like compared to me, she said with a grin. Bitch, he whispered to her once again, what only caused her smile to deepen. Issei turned to the other girl. Irina, he said and took her into his arms. He opened her shirt and began to remove her clothes very quickly. While they were making out, they were now moving in the direction of Irina's room, that was the closest by. So far they had actually been doing it right on the corridor, just like Donasek and Kalawarner did. Not that Issei had a particular problem with that. But they had every intention to spend the entire night together, and an actual room and an actual bed would be clearly better. As he entered Irina, just a short distance before they had reached the room, he was even more careful than with Rainer and he started to move inside her a few moments later. And, does it feel any different? Rainer, who was walking next to them, asked. Not really. You both feel wonderful, he answered. Issei. Irina moaned. He carried her inside the room, his dick still buried inside her, and let them both fall into the bed, where he continued to do her. Meanwhile he let one of his hands glide over Rainer's body, who took a place right next to them. Issei. I love you, Irina said with him lying on top of her. They continued like this for a while. A short time later Irina was on all fours in front of the bed, while Issei was thrusting into his childhood friend from behind. He admitted that she was incredibly cute in this position, even more than usually. A moment later he felt himself tightening up. Irina. I am close, he told her. I am too, she replied. Please. He didn't need to be told and increased the speed. A second later he felt as he released himself deep inside Irina. At the same time, she cried out loud in pleasure. As it was over, he let her sink to the ground. I guess our little exorcist is feeling better now, Rainer commented, turning back into her true form, her wings spreading behind her back. But I still have a lot to make up to you, right Issei-kun? She kneeled down in front of him and took his member in her mouth. Less than 10 minutes later, he and Rainer had sex once again. This time in her true form. It was a bit strange, how she actually wrapped her wings around him while they were doing it, like a scene from a bizarre mythological picture. As Issei woke up the next morning, next to the completely naked Irina and Rainer, he then at first fully realized that he was now no longer a virgin, a long-time dream come true at least, and second, that he did it with not only one but two beautiful girls. XXXXXXX present their fight had just ended, the four of them had completely obliterated a group of golems 7 times their own number. For the last part of the fight, Issei had used transfer. For a few moments, an ability of his sacred gear, that allowed him to give a bit of its power to others and boost his comrades' fighting strength even more. Just after it was over, they saw that Odin, the man called Wolverine and Steve Rogers in his blue Captain America uniform had appeared. Beside them were a few others they didn't recognize. But they were obviously soldiers, dressed in the same black gears some members of their own group did for their training. Odin. Issei greeted him. Very impressive. You have all made great progress. So much is clear, the god replied. There is something we have to talk about. His expression turned serious. Gabriel is gone. Gone. What do you mean gone? Issei asked. She told us that she just wanted some time for herself. That is one way to put it, Odin commented. An old enemy has been sighted. Someone who she has a history with. And she just wants to go after this guy by herself, he wanted to know. That is not the smartest thing to do, Zenobia pointed out. And haven't you told us that most of the others are on a mission in some other universe? And that is coming from you. You are probably the most headstrong person I ever met, Kiba commented. That is coming from the guy who stubbornly refuses to tell me what his issue is with the Excaliburs, she countered. Kiba's face became unreadable. Let us not talk about this any longer, he said simply. Zenobia knew there was more about this story. But every time it was mentioned, he blocked it up. Still, she wasn't completely clueless anymore. During their training she had heard the Guardians mention something to Kiba, something about the spirits of deceased souls following him, or clinging to him. Whatever it was, something terrible must have happened in Kiba's past. Well, it wasn't the topic right now anyway. Gabriel's disappearance was XXX. It seems that Gabriel is not exactly rational when it comes to this special person, Odin admitted. Like I said, they have a history together. I suspect you would like to help her. You are damn right I will, issei responded. I owe Gabriel a lot. In more than one way, he thought. I see, Odin stated. You should know, there are a lot of things about Gabriel that you are not aware about. But if you decide to go after her now, you will find out about them. This thing might change the way how you see her. It doesn't matter, he answered. I agree with issei here, Rainer claimed. Even if I certainly didn't always liked her methods. Gabriel's actions had in the end done much to help us. Isn't that right, Asia? She looked at the former nun, who was standing at the sidelines. Rainer-sama is right, Asia said. In a way you could say that she had saved both of us. Well, at least in a sense, she stated. I am going in every case, issei stated. And I will take everyone along who wants to. This is what I had expected from you, Odin told them. In that case I suggest that you end your training 2 days earlier. But before we go, there are a few last things. Irina asked. Yes, I will be coming with you, the North God informed them. But what about us? Rias questioned. The raiding game we are training for is set in 2 days, and if we just skip the rest of our training. You have all made as much progress as could be expected, Odin replied. 2 days more would not make a great difference. And you devils especially have already learned all what we could teach you. You mean all you wanted to teach us, Rias pointed out. We could be stronger, if you just taught us the same techniques you have shown the others, she stated angrily. We have told you our reasons. The techniques you are talking about are only known to a limited number of individuals. The members of our order are under them. Be honest, if we taught you them, could you resist showing them the rest of your faction? This could in the long run upset the political balance in your world. But you do trust these fallen angels with it, she hissed. These fallen angels have actually joined our organization, he reminded her. We have taught you the basics of our key manipulation and helped you realize more of your own potential. You can hardly ask for more given the situation between our factions. Or that your brother tried to blackmail us into cooperation. By the way, we have hardly taught the two known as Donasek and Kalawarner more than we did your group. But you taught them to Gabriel and Rainer. Rainer has passed several tests we have passed on her. The first one not to kill Asia. And Gabriel has been a member of our organization for decades, he reminded her. Either way, you all have made as much progress as could be hoped for 2 weeks of training. Even if we have taught you some of this "special techniques, it would have also caused you to lose time to work on your other abilities. And we both know you all have a lot of unused potential. Okay. She finally responded, giving in. Good, the god said. We will leave in a few minutes. But before that, he made a gesture and the landscape around them changed as they were transported back from the training's dimension to the regular world. They were standing in the middle of the great weapon storage hall. Before we go, our new recruits will be given weapons they will carry for the time being, he announced with a light smile on his face. Issei, Rainer, Asia, I guess you have already received the gift Jean and Madeline wanted to provide you with, he questioned. We did, Issei responded. You can say that, Rainer remarked, remembering a short exchange she and Asia had with Madeline 2 days ago. Issei Hyodo, Odin announced, the weapon that had been chosen for you is this, the Sword of Kronos. One of the soldiers who had accompanied them brought a blade. They all realized that the weapon was radiating an aura that rivaled the most powerful holy swords, while it however was not holy itself, not in the regular sense. This sword is one of the oldest relics of this order, the North God stated. It is said to be forged from the sickle the Titan Kronos had once used to slay his tyrannical father itself. A weapon that is said to cut through time itself. This however is actually a simplification, he explained. When you have been able to unlock its power, it will help you to create and resist time and transdimensional powers on a very high level. It will also allow you to create portals without the help of the hand device you are currently wearing. Beside that, it might also help you to stabilize and control your own power if you learn to use it correctly. Thank you, Issei said impressed, taking the weapon. For you Murayama, he addressed her, we have another sword. This one is special in its own way. Darien had especially asked for you to have it. Really? The girl questioned. Yes, he thinks that having it will help you in your development. It is not quite as old or powerful as Issei's blade. But he has a certain connection to it and he believes it will help you in controlling the power you have inherited from him and Issei. She nodded. Rainer, he said, you have already received your true weapon, but we still have a small gift for you. This is one holy dagger out of our arsenal, he stated as one of the soldiers handed a small blade to her. We believe it will be useful to you. A few moments later they handed similar weapons to Donasek and Kalawarner, who accepted them silently. Irina and Zenobia, you already possess your weapons of choice. But we have another gift for you, he said. At his mental comment, something appeared in his hand. It looked like a small globe of energy. Of course that was only a visible representation of what it truly was. Would you please show me your Excalibur fragments? He asked. The two exorcists were exchanging a short look. But they had decided a long time ago that they trusted these people and lifted up their swords. What you see here is a gift from the spirit of Merlin himself, Odin informed them. He has agreed to leave for some time 2 small shards of his soul to you. He moved his hand and the tiny globe he had been holding split into 2 and the 2 halved moved towards them and merged with the 2 Excaliburs they were holding. His spirit will strengthen the power of your blades and his wisdom will be there for you, whenever you call on it, he said. I don't know what I should say, Zenobia stated, as she realized what just happened. This is just incredible. A part of Merlin's spirit was now inside of their blades. That meant both of them were now practically sacred gears in addition to holy weapons. We are allies, Odin just reminded them. Now, then let us go. He started to summon a portal right in front of them, that would bring them back to their own world. As soon as they had all stepped through, they saw that they had indeed returned. They were all standing right in front of the old mansion, that Issei's group had chosen as their base. XXXXXXX Universe 112506 Things were not going like expected, and that was an understatement. Gabriel knew she only had her carelessness to thank for this. Tell me, fallen angel, what are you doing here? What do you know about the death of the Occult Research Club? He nearly shouted. Why were you questioning my schoolmates about it? Gabriel admitted she didn't quite know what to say. Tell me, he shouted, while he was powering up. I have heard about it, she told him a partial truth. I had a suspicion who could be responsible, and wanted to find out more. The alternate Issei's voice now became a dangerous growl. What do you know about him? He yelled. Just great. Telling him that wasn't exactly the best idea, she thought. But telling this version of Issei anymore would probably not be a good thing either. There was a reason why the Guardians were working in secret in most universe after all. If they acted too open or direct, it was practically an invitation to their enemies to do the same thing, and it might lead to complete destruction. Beside that, she had truly no wish to tell this Issei, or any other, about her personal relationship with Crossel. I cannot tell you much actually, she lied. I have met this guy once who was targeting high-class devils, and as I heard about this, I thought he could be responsible. But I wasn't sure. Yes, and because of just that you came here and start questioning students. It was clear that he didn't believe her. Try another one. She admitted it hadn't been the best lie either. She had just made it up on the spot. And at the moment she had truly other worries on her mind. If you won't tell me, fallen angel, I will force you, he hissed, while running forward and trying to land a punch on her with his sacred gear on his left arm. He was very fast, she realized. She moved out of the way and at the same time used all her energy to shield herself. His blow missed her, but just barely. As she turned around, however, she saw that Issei had used her short distraction to start charging the dragon shot technique. Damn it, she thought. He was good, she admitted. It wasn't every day that someone acted this sneaky who could by the looks barely contain his own rage. But right now exactly this was causing her serious trouble. Issei turned around, fired, while was still less than 2 meters away from her. Her chances to evade were very bad, she knew. So she put everything into shielding herself. The shot hits her at the shoulder. Just as predicted, she had not managed to completely dodge it. But her own shielding, along with her key control, was stopping the worst of it. Yet it still caused some damage. Issei was already making his next move. Tell me what you know about that man, he shouted. All pretenses of restraint were gone now as he attacked her again. This version of Issei was strong, if one remembered that he had only activated his sacred gear a few weeks ago. Not quite as strong as the one from her world, but more than strong enough to be a threat to her. Her greatest advantage was her ki control and her fighting abilities. This was however countered by the fact that she simply did not want to harm him. She just wanted to get away without having to tell him too much for his own good. The sad thing was that he obviously wasn't going to be cooperative here. This is the last chance, fallen angel, he said to her. Tell me what you know and I might let you live. Balance breaker. She heard Drake's voice a moment later and watched how the typical red-scaled armor formed itself around the alternate issei. It could have hardly been any worse. Okay. I will tell you what I know, she called out. Just let us sit down and talk about this calmly. Issei looked at her for a few moments, saying nothing, torn between his common sense and his wish to find out something about his friend's killer and his burning rage towards her and her entire race. But once again luck wasn't exactly on Gabriel's side. A group of people arrived in this moment, running towards them. Gabriel recognized 3 of them as members of Sona Saitri's peerage. The other 2, however. Irina. Zenobia. She exclaimed, recognizing the 2 exorcists. What are you doing here, fallen angel? Irina Shido asked. And how do you know my name? Of course, she thought. These were the Zenobia and Irina of this word, who came to this town for some reason. The only question was why were they with the devils? But that didn't matter right now. I have been thinking about it, and I rather take my leave, Gabriel stated. The sudden appearance of the others might actually serve as a useful distraction for her. She used the device on her arm to form a portal right behind her. Just like the ones of the symbiote suits, it was being activated by her thoughts alone. You think you can simply get away? Issei yelled as he saw what she was doing. He and Irina jumped into her direction nearly at the same time. XXXXXXX Mittelt was currently walking through the area around the castle that had become her home, during the last few weeks. She could not exactly say that she felt comfortable here, not by far. In the time she had been here, she had seen much that in the same manner terrified her and turned her stomach around. The worst thing were the humans, she had to admit. Not that she had ever been particularly fond of that race, but since she had arrived, she had been watching what was happening to the people who were being sent here. She had heard about experimentation and other things. She hadn't seen exactly what was happening to them. But she had seen the bodies being carried away again and again, nearly a dozen since she had arrived here, she thought. She didn't like what was going on here, not at all. But it was still better to go along with it than dying by the hands of the others. It wasn't the first time that she was threatened with this after all, she thought about Sartale. She knew the one who was directly responsible for the experimentation was the human called Valper Galilei. Something about the guy just gave her the creeps. He could even rival Fried Selzen in the creepy area. She had heard about a high-class devil that was being held somewhere in this building. Not that she had actually seen it. She knew the only reason that this one was still alive was the worth as a potential hostage. Not that she cared about what happened to a filthy devil. No, it was more the talk about, using her as leverage for the new war, that truly unsettled her. How in the world had she managed to get involved into this? She asked herself. XXXXXXX the headquarters of Issei's team. They had just returned, but were realizing quickly that they were not alone. So he is here, Odin stated. Just as expected. Leave down your weapons, he told them. He is on our side. Who is? Zenobia asked, a bit confused. Since you all have spent the last 12 days in our world, Issei's and Mariama's parents had been told by Sona Saitri that they had been on a school trip. Darien and some of our other leaders, however, thought it would be good to make sure about their safety as well, Odin informed them. So we decided to send one of our members to this word to have an eye on your families here while you were gone. The lords would, for the most part, not order an attack on relatives of new recruits. Not because of any compassion, of course, but because they would simply consider such a tactic beneath them. Sadly, there are others in the ranks of the enemy, who have less pride, a figure who had just appeared leaving the building said to them. So I came here to make sure. They all saw him better now. It was a seemingly young man, but of course they knew he could actually be centuries old, with shoulder-long black hair and dark clothes. On his neck, they saw, he was wearing a rosario. To that came a very strong holy energy he was radiating. Great. Another exorcist, Kiba stated sardonically. The sheer power that they felt coming from this man, however, impressed them all and especially frightened the devils, since as an exorcist he was practically their natural enemy. One thing was clear, however, in comparison to this man, Zenobia and Irina were mere amateurs. Grigory, Odin greeted the man, it is good to see you. There is something we have to talk about. It is about Gabriel. I see, the young man replied. So she had finally done something stupid, didn't she? Yes, Odin admitted. I guess it was only a question of time, the unknown exorcist said. Hey, don't talk about Gabriel like that, Issei addressed him. She had done much for me and the others here. You are Issei Hyodo, aren't you? The man asked. Good. That is one of the reasons I accepted this task here. I was interested to meet you after I read the report on you, he smiled. But I fear you don't know much about your friend and her past. What are you talking about? Issei asked. Well, maybe it is on the time you find out, the man named Grigory said with a look in Odin's direction. Before they could say anything else, however, they were interrupted. A portal appeared in front of them and out came, or rather falling out of it, were 3 people. Gabriel was one of them, as they had hoped. But the others, to their surprise, they recognized a second Issei and Irina. As the 3 newcomers regained their senses, however, and took in their surroundings, it was on them to be shocked. Issei-kun, where are we? The second Irina asked him. Issei Hyodo, the devil, remembered this place, it was however something he would rather forget. It was the same mansions where he and the Grimoire peerage had been fighting and killing a stray devil together. It was here where they had been working together the first time. This, however, was nothing compared to the feeling he got as he saw the group that was now standing in front of them. Rias, Asia and the others, alive. That was impossible. But there was also standing another version of himself, right in front of him. It was like he was looking in a mirror. There was also Zenobia and a second Irina. How can that be? Gasped the Irina right next to him. But then he felt an incredible rush of anger as he saw another face in the crowd. But that couldn't be. You, he screamed. He felt himself instantly rushing towards her, without even thinking. And he activated his balance breaker once again. Rainer had barely time to prepare herself for the attack. This Issei, she could sense, was a devil. It was not hard to figure out what he was so angry about. She materialized her new second pair of wings and released her full power and concentrated all her energy. If it hadn't been for the training of the last 2 weeks, she knew, she would be dead. She would have died before one of her comrades even had the chance to react. But now, he was charging her with his bare hands. Or rather the hands of his armor. She dodged the first blow he sent at her and then blocked the second one with 2 light spears which she had formed with both hands, backed up with concentrated ki energy. But against a fully realized balance breaker she was far from sure that it would be enough. Her power had grown immensely through her training and the special help she received. Still against the boosting ability and a completely enraged enemy. Suddenly she felt even more energy flowing through her body. She realized that her Issei was using transfer to assist her and she sent him a thankful look. The others had meanwhile surrounded them after recovering from the surprise and were ready to subdue the completely enraged Red Dragon Emperor. Beside that, there was still a risk that he might actually drift into Juggernaut Drive with his level of anger. Even if he was still relatively new to his power and his abilities didn't seem fully developed yet. There was still a risk. They should better take him down quickly, they all knew. That is enough, boy, Odin said to him. Stand down now or we will stop you. But the alternate Issei didn't look as if he was willing to listen. It is you, isn't it? Her opponent yelled at her. You are behind this. How did you come back to life? Are you trying to play with my mind again? I won't let you. He boosted his power once more several times. I have no idea what you are talking about, she answered. This caused only a growl from him and another attack, which she blocked again. The others reacted instantly and moved to take him down. Issei was the first to arrive. He tackled his double and pushed him aside. Why are you helping her? Devil Issei shouted, mostly ignoring that he was talking with another version of himself. I know you have your reasons to be angry at her, damn it I know, Issei responded. But calm down for now. You are not thinking straight. Then suddenly, it was over. Reset. They heard Diedrag's voice and he fell out of balance breaker and sank to his knees. After the clash with Gabriel and having already used balance breaker before, he was now simply at his limit. Don't worry, we won't hurt him, Irina said as she approached her own double. It is nice to meet you. Well, me, she greeted her counterpart. XXXXXXX. It was just a few minutes later that they were now all sitting together. They had given their two guests a few explanations about what happened and where exactly they were. The other issei still didn't look exactly happy, but he accepted it, at least for the time being. He knew he was completely outmatched against all of them anyway. He was still sending them all uneasy looks, even Asia. And at Rainer and the other fallen angels, including Gabriel, he was looking with pure malice. I have gotten important information, Gabriel was explaining to them in this moment. Kokabiel is planning to restart the Great War between the supernatural factions. For that he is trying to provoke the three races against each other. This is not all. He has restarted the so-called Holy Sword project. As she had said this, Kiba suddenly froze. What? He asked in complete shock. How? He growled. They all were sending him a curious look. But only the other members of the peerage knew exactly why he reacted like this. He is working with a man named Valper Galilei, an excommunicated former archbishop who was the man responsible for the original project, and by my information he is cooperating with a ring of human slave traders to supply Galilei with human raw material, for his experiments. So far none of them had survived. The others could barely believe what they were hearing. Especially the fallen angels under them were shocked. Valper Galilei, Kiba whispered the name angrily. Kokabiel has a secret fortress in Eastern Europe, where a group of his warriors and Galilei are performing the experiments in secret and are also trying to build up their forces. Their goal is to create an army of artificial holy sword wielders and other super warriors for the coming war, she told them. Besides that, they have also captured a pureblood devil, a member of the Phoenix clan to cause aggression between the devils and the fallen angels. And how have you gotten all this information so quickly? The man named Grigori asked her. She said nothing. He told you about it, didn't he? You have been meeting with Crossel. Yes, she finally admitted. He is our enemy Gabriel. You know that as well as any of us. If he told you that, he has a good reason for it, Odin pointed out. I know all that. But I could not just pass that information up, she replied. Then there is a good chance that we will be walking right into a trap if we follow that information. Yes, she answered. We will inform the others about your past with Crossel, he told her. If you expect them to go into a battle based on information that you provided on his word, then they have a right to know. I understand, she said. She looked downwards. But I have one request. Asia, I want to tell her myself. Issei took a good look at her. He had never seen Gabriel as depressed as now. What in the world could be getting at her like this? What do you want to tell me? The former nun asked, a bit afraid of the answer. Asia, about what I will tell you. I only want you to know that I am sorry. I didn't know. I hadn't known that it would come like that. Gabriel? She asked. Come with me, she said. We will talk alone. Both of them left the others behind for the moment. What do you want to tell us? Issei asked Odin. For the beginning, I want to tell you a story. A story how we have originally discovered this universe, your universe, a long time ago. Our order decided back then not to interfere directly, unless it would become necessary. If we did, it would only provoke our enemies to do the same thing and endanger your entire world. We had however decided to recruit some members from your reality as agents to observe this universe. The first member we had recruited was a very promising candidate. This young man had been a member of one of the 72 pillars of the underworld, who had decided to leave Devil Society. This part caught especially Ria's attention. He was a hybrid with fallen angel blood, who had joined us and became our first agent in your world. During one of his first missions, he came into contact with an angel, who fell in love with him and decided willingly to give up her divine protection and leave heaven to follow him. She as well joined our group a short time later and the two became a pair. That is now nearly 100 years ago. The name of this man was Alec Crossel, a descendant of the Crossel clan, Odin told them. They all were looking in the direction where Asia and Gabriel had just left. And I think you can guess who the angel had been, Odin stated. For a long time everything went well and these two had been happy, until a bit over 15 years ago. At that time Gabriel had been leading a special group that our order had founded and that performed experimental research. In this case they had been looking for ways to remove sacred gears from their wielders without killing them in the process. The aim was to allow sacred gear users who no longer want their gifts, that made them targets for the entire supernatural world. Issei's alternate counterpart looked up for a moment as he heard these words, his expression unreadable. Crossel had taken an interest in this project as well and he was eagerly supporting his lover. Odin's expression turned bleak. What we didn't realize at this point was that Crossel, during one of his last missions, had been corrupted by the enemy and had turned against us. To let you better understand what had happened back then, I will show you. Once again the entire place around them seemed to change. But of course it was only an illusion. Odin's mental powers were showing them pictures from the past. They were now standing, at least in their minds, inside a large room they had never seen before. In front of them they could see a group of people. One of them was Gabriel, looking nearly the same as now. Right behind her was a group of 4 humans, 3 men and a woman. They were obviously scientists, wearing white coats. And standing next to them was. That is him, the alternate issei growled as he recognized the killer of his friends. The hatred that was now to see on his face surpassed even his rage at Rainer by far. XXX, is everything okay beloved? They heard the man asking Gabriel. His voice sounded warm and comforting, quite the opposite of what Issei had seen as he had slaughtered his friends. Yes, don't worry, she replied. It will all work out. I can do this. She smiled. In front of them was another human, fixated at the wall, a young woman. Some of them, especially Issei's alternate self and Rainer recognized instantly what was going on before them. It was a removal ceremony for a sacred gear. Dr. Argento. She addressed one of the humans next to them. Is everything ready? Issei and most of the other spectators looked up in shock as they heard the name. It couldn't be. Both the sacred gear and Miss Miyami are in exactly the state we predicted, the man informed her. By our data everything should work out. Good. You can be happy, Leon. If we succeed here, your daughter will one day be able to live a normal life as well. She was born with a sacred gear, wasn't she? Yes, our people have found out a few weeks ago. She is one of the reason why I am helping with your work. Exactly, Gabriel stated. You don't have to be afraid, Yui, she said to the woman in front of them. It won't take long anymore and you will be free, she said as she reaches out her hand and then inside her chest. A moment later the woman named Yui Miyami let out a short scream of pain, just before Gabriel removed something from her body, a sacred gear. In opposite to the green shimmering rings of the twilight healing however, this one was a light bluish colored globe. And with a bright smile on her face, she handed it to Crossel, who accepted it, returning her smile. It was then, when everything suddenly turned around. The woman fixated on the wall suddenly passed out. Alarms were going off all around them. Yui. Gabriel called out. Yui. Gabriel, there is something wrong, the man named Leon Argento said to her as he checked her vitals. She is dying, Gabriel. It didn't work. We have to give her sacred gear back, now. They all turned to Crossel, who however didn't pay much attention to any of them. Alec, she said. You have heard him. We need to return her sacred gear. We have failed. She cannot live without her sacred gear. Our data was wrong. We need to return it, she shouted at him. Please. But he was just standing there, looking at the sacred gear in his hands. Circulatory collapse, Leon Argento yelled. Her mind and her body are just shutting down without the sacred gear. Gabriel. Gadomnet. How can this happen? You told us you know the correct way. Gabriel. Finally, he said, the power that should have been mine from the beginning is now in my hands, he announced as he placed the sacred gear inside his body. Alec. Gabriel asked in disbelief at what her lover was doing. But it was too late anyway. All her vitals are gone. It is over, Leon declared, devastated. Gabriel, he addressed her angrily. How could this happen? You gave us the data. You told us you know how to remove a sacred gear safely. You told us nothing could go wrong. I was wrong. I thought I could do it. I hoped. You hoped. You told us you know for sure. You lied. The data you gave us was manipulated. Yes, I lied, she admitted. All of the spectators, but especially 3 of them, were feeling sick at what they were seeing. The 2 issei because it all reminded them all too much of what happened to Asia, and Rainer because it gave her a good picture what she had allowed herself to become. My God, Gabriel, why? The man named Leon asked her. Because I told her to do it, Crossel answered him in her stead. I told her that it was necessary. It is said that the experiment didn't work exactly as expected. His voice was now cold like ice, just like Issei remembered it. Experiment? Gabriel asked, confused. But you don't need to worry about her death. If she had survived, I would have needed to get rid of her later anyway. After all, I cannot allow this experiment to become common knowledge. What? Gabriel could not believe what she was hearing. But what happened next horrified her even more. He formed a light spear in his hand and with a single move struck the man next to her down. Asia's father. They asked themselves. Then he formed more light spears and threw them at the rest of the shocked group of humans, killing them as well. Only Gabriel, who was still frozen in complete horror and disbelief, was still standing there. I am sorry, beloved, he told her. But I can't allow the details of your work to be known to the public. Nobody will ever take this sacred gear from me. You know, the Guardians will never accept you back after they found out what happened here and what you have done. Illegal human experimentation, murder, deception of coworkers. When you have made up your mind, then come and join me. He placed a kiss on her lips before he turned around and left her behind. XXX. The scene ended. They all didn't quite knew how to react to what they had just seen. After this had happened, Odin told them, the wife of Gabriel's head researcher, who became a victim of the massacre, as she found out what had happened, out of fear, abandoned her infant daughter at a church facility. A short time later she vanished. It is possible that Crossel was responsible for this as well. Even we are not completely sure. In one point, however, Crossel was wrong. We did accept her back. Even if had taken her a few years to be fully trusted again. XXX. A short distance from them, a young completely shocked former nun was also not quite sure how she should react to the story that a completely devastated fallen angel had just told her. XXXXXXX. Meanwhile, a half-world away, the man known as Crossel was standing alone in the middle of the wilderness, thinking about the latest events and especially his own moves, as he sensed a presence appearing close to him. As he turned around, he already knew who he would be seeing, a strangely careless-looking white-haired young man. Accelerator, he greeted him. Crossel, he replied casually. What can I do for you? He asked. He knew this being quite well. After all, he was the one who had defeated him on his mission years ago and so in a sense caused his defection to the other side. How should I say? The lords have noticed a few odd things about your latest actions. You shouldn't think that we doubt your loyalty. It is just curiosity, he stated. But tell me, why did you tell that fallen angel Gabriel about Kokabiel's plans? Especially after you spent the last weeks supporting Kokabiel. So why? Gabriel had just told Asia the entire role she had played about her past. How she had unwittingly helped to ruin her entire family before she was even old enough to remember. She had at least hoped for a reaction, an answer. Even an angry one. But the former nun just stayed silent and was staring at her. Finally, she had enough. Please say something. Even if you hate me. But please, would you at least talk to me, she pleaded. Asia was looking at her for a few moments more. You didn't know, she finally said. You didn't know that he would do this. No. But I still killed an innocent woman, unintentionally, yes. But it was only because I lied to her about the risks that she even agreed to the ritual in the first place. I lied to your father and the others, got them involved into all of that, and in doing so got them killed, and possibly your mother as well. I am sorry. I am no better than Rainer had been. No, you are not, the former nun replied flatly. But you both have changed, haven't you? So let us no longer talk about it for now, she told her quick and short. We should return to the others, right? After all, we have much to talk about after all what happened. Something about her entire demeanor was off, Gabriel realized. She looked stiff and her voice sounded forced. As if she was barely managing to contain her own feelings. And these feelings were quite clear to Gabriel. She knew the signs of barely repressed grief and rage all too well. Yes, she simply responded. Good, then let us go, Asia just stated shortly. She was about to turn around to the others. Asia, I am sorry, Gabriel repeated. I know, she replied. You didn't say that you forgive me, she said. You are right, Asia stated, I did not. Gabriel actually felt a light but painful stab at her cold words. XXX as both of them returned a minute later, Gabriel could literally feel the looks of all of them on her. They all knew what she had done now. She and Asia sat down next to the others. They were not the only ones who had been gone for a short time. Just after watching the scene Odin had just shown them all, the alternate issei just couldn't take it anymore. He had walked away and told them all that he wanted to be alone for a moment. His Irina had followed him less than 2 minutes later. They had both returned about a half minute ago, just before Asia and Gabriel did, and now their two guests were once again sitting close together and staring at the others. Both of them, but especially the second issei, looked still as if they were not too far away from losing their senses. But it seemed it had become a bit better, they admitted. Devil Issei was right now staring wordlessly at the point where his counterpart, Rainer and their Irina were sitting. Gabriel admitted he was looking like a bomb that was about to explode. But maybe, she also admitted, it was partly her own fears speaking to her. I admit it is fascinating to meet another version of myself. Diedrag stated, for them all to hear. Yes, for once someone actually worth talking to, right? The other Diedrag replied. But whatever, I admit that this is really an interesting meeting. And, do you already found a way to beat Albion? Not yet. Diedrag answered. But maybe it won't take so long anymore. The others admitted it was quite intimidating to hear the two identical dragons talking to each other like that. You have all heard about what happened back then? Gabriel asked them all insecurely. Yes, we did, Zenobia replied. Issei looked at her, as if he was wanting to say something. His gaze was mirrored by the second issei, whose expression was however full of anger. But before either of them could say something, another voice spoke up. It seems you are not so perfect after all, right, fallen angel? Rias remarked a bit smugly. She knew starting an argument with Gabriel was actually counterproductive right now. But she couldn't help herself. From the beginning this fallen angel had done nothing but provoking and mocking her. Now it was her chance to get back at her a little bit. You know Bucho, you are not helping here, Akano reminded her. But she as well didn't sound really convincing and had a small sly grin on her face. Like Rias, she wasn't happy about the way this particular fallen had been treating her master. XXX Rias Queen, to put it simply, hated fallen angels for a long time, ever since her father allowed her mother to die. Despite that, at least to a half, being one herself. She admitted her feelings had toned down a bit, or maybe she just had been forced to tone them down, since they had been living side by side with some of them for the last weeks. Especially after a few more or less nasty confrontations. The first one was with Kalawarner and Donasik, who ended up with him calling her a traitor and a cowardly hypocrite who blamed her own father for something others did. This comment made her angry enough to just attack the fallen angel right there, and by the looks he had been all too willing to return the favor, but they were both stopped by a couple of the guardians appearing in their way who forced them to stay down. All that however was topped by a statement from Rainer of all people. She had told her that she had nerve to accuse her father Barakwile of abandoning her, for not being there when her mother was killed, while she herself just stood by and let her kill Issei, simply because her devil master told her to. This comment, even more than she wanted to admit, struck home. Was she truly worse than her father? From that point on she tried, somewhat, to get along with the fallen angels. At least the ones who were with them in the other dimension. But right now, they had other things to deal with anyway. XXX they were now all looking at the two counterparts of Issei and Irina who had arrived here along with Gabriel. One question I would ask is, however, why are you two even together? Zenobia wanted to know from the alternate issei and Irina sitting before them now. Not that I have a problem with it, I mean. But. That is a good question actually, Irina admitted. I mean, Issei-kun is a devil in your world and you are, well, still a servant of the church. The same could be said about you, Issei's counterpart responded. He tried not to show any emotion. We have already explained who we are to you and why we are together, Issei told him. After Rias Grimori and her peerage had been murdered, the situation between the three factions had become worse, Irina's double explained. The church sent a number of exorcists, under them were me and Zenobia. We were sent to Kuo to investigate. Here I met Issei again and found out that he became a devil. But that didn't change anything for me. So in your world Rias' plan to turn me into a devil had actually worked out? Issei asked his counterpart. A parallel world, devil, Issei thought, still not quite believing it. Just like in some science fiction movie. One where he had not become a devil, where Rainer had spared Asia, simply because that fallen angel over there had offered her an alternative, a world where Rias and the others were still alive, and where he and Rainer were. No. It was just too crazy to think about. His gaze fell on the second Irina, who was still watching him curiously. There was no denying it. This was Irina. Just like the one sitting right next to him. His head was swimming as he tried to process all the crazy information he had gotten during the last half hour. There was, however, one other thing. The man he had been looking for the entire time was here, the first true lead since the murders. Of course, if he came originally from this world, it was no surprise that he couldn't find him. He would find him and put an end to this murderer once and for all, he swore to himself. Yes, he simply replied. And in yours you have actually forgiven her. You are still with her. He pointed to Rainer angrily. After what this bitch did to you, to us. Says the one who became a servant for the person who intentionally let you die and tried to take advantage of both of us, Rainer remarked sardonically. This caused a frown from Devil Issei. His eyes drifted to the redhead sitting a few meters away from them, who visibly flinched and was looking more than uneasy at the last comment. Alternate Issei's gaze shifted to Rias for a short moment. But he didn't say anything. It was just all too much. Issei, as hard this is probably for you to believe, I truly regret and I'm sorry for the things that I did to you, Rainer told him, and for what I was planning to do to Asia, she said with a side glance at the blonde girl. Devil Issei said nothing, still glaring at her for a few moments. He was still fighting down the urge to attack her whenever he looked at her. Having just received an apology from Rainer of all people made him feel even more like he had just seen an alien, something that he actually did in some sense, he realized. After all, she, like everyone else here, wasn't from his world. A part of him just wanted to scream as loud as he could and run away. Damn it, I truly need to start with my apologies all over again from the beginning, don't I? Rainer commented with a light smile. Alternate Issei only frowned at her. So what you said? We have really been killed in your world? Rias asked him nervously. Yes, he replied grimly. Even Asia? Kiba questioned. All of them, the entire peerage. He left nobody alive, except me. But why? I wish I knew, he replied bitter. You are the Red Dragon Emperor, Gabriel stated, if your world is like ours. That is enough reason for many people to manipulate you in one direction or the other. You would know, Akano remarked. Besides that, you have a very special relationship with that guy after all, right? Gabriel said nothing. That is enough, Issei addressed them all. She has made a mistake, maybe more than one. But she is hardly the only one here, right? He was looking from Rias and Akano to Rainer and Donasek and back. It is not that she knew what would happen. It was this bastard Crossel who had manipulated her. For a moment all of them were looking at him. Well said, Issei. Irina then told him. Thank you, Issei, Gabriel said. Rainer just sent a smirk at him. His own counterpart said nothing. Bucho. Alternate Issei then turned to Rias. She admitted she was not quite used to him calling her that. What Crossel had told me, is it true? Have you let me die? I am sorry, she just replied after a moment, visible distraught. The truth was, deep inside, for a moment, she was terrified. It was a quiet, terrible and irrational fear that had been lurking deep inside her mind for over a week now. The reason was quite simple, the recordings Gabriel had shown them a week ago. The one of Universe 003 or something like that. The one with her own counterpart from that particular world. Or to be more precise, rather, the rest of what was to see on them what the fallen angel had not shown the entire group. It was actually something Gabriel had told her about in private, a short time later. Then she had shown her the rest of the recording. It was just as Rias had already suspected, the servant, that it had been talking about had actually rebelled against her counterpart. Only that it was been worse than she had expected, much worse. She had watched the part where he finally found out that he had been turned into a devil and supposed to be her servant. He had been furious. He had leashed out on her and left her without a moment of hesitation, and whoever was stupid enough to stand in his way. There was a time not long ago where she was convinced that every servant she turned into devil would be thankful to her, would agree to serve her gladly. For turning them into a higher being and giving them a better life. She had been a fool. That was before she had seen members of the Guardians made the strongest devils look like a joke, before she had gotten a few glimpses of Issei's potential and watched how quickly he developed, still as a human. And before she had heard the stories about all the other immensely powerful entities out there who could easily crush the entire devil race if they wanted. Not only that, she had stories that the presence of the biblical god, some of the Hindu gods, and even Ophis and Great Red was actually keeping other super entities like them away from their cosmos. Not to mention all the dangerous enemies that the Guardians themselves and their allies are keeping busy in countless other dimensions. A few weeks ago she had thought of the devils of one of the great powers. Now she realized they had only even survived so far through the protection of others. Why should anybody be thankful about being turned into a devil when they were nothing but another weak race? Had she truly ever been this arrogant? But that wasn't what truly scared her right now. These things, as fearful as they were far away. No, the current source of her fear was very close by. She had seen how her so-called servant had turned on her other self firsthand and what had happened. He had been so angry, and so powerful. He had angrily exclaimed right in front of her that he was nobody's servant, and that he had no master except for some old man who had either trained or raised him, and then he just broke through the ceiling. Razor had tried to stop him. Another unpleasant thought, her counterpart had actually been forced to marry Razor Phoenix. But it was nothing compared to what she saw then. The being that her counterpart thought she could turn into a servant had killed him, with ease, as if he was nothing. He had actually ripped out his heart. Ripped out his heart, she thought in horror. Had it been her counterpart who had stood in his way in that moment, it would have been her who were killed in that way. It could have just as easily been her. And who said, yes, he would surely come back and kill her counterpart as well. A Phoenix, like Razor, was supposed to be immortal, she knew. But since the last weeks she was also aware that there were ways to counter or even completely negate such abilities. And obviously her counterpart's servant knew such abilities. How could her other self ever been so stupid to try to turn someone like this without asking him? Then her thoughts instantly turned to Issei. Would he have hated her as well? Would he have killed her, sooner or later? The story the other Issei had told them had only woken up her fears once again. It might not have been him who had killed her other self of his world, but the look she had seen on him a few times, especially when he had asked her if she had let him die, it made her shudder. What about the others? She secretly asked herself deep down. No, they were not just her servants, they were her friends, she knew that. They loved her. Just like she loved really? A voice from deep inside her asked. Is this not only a piece of propaganda that you are telling both your victims and yourself to make them more docile and to ease your own mind? Monster, demon, the voice said. No, she truly cared about her peerage, she told herself. As valuable pieces, the voice added. No, she thought. She had heard so many stories about devils who had been killed by their own servants. She had thought that something like that could never happen to her. How incredibly arrogant. But now, after seeing those scenes, she could barely look at one of them without having doubts coming up, and feeling ice-cold fear deep inside her. Akano, Kiba, Kaneko, did they all secretly hated her? Were they truly her friends, or were they secretly waiting for the chance to stab her in the back, spit in her face and tell her how much they all despised her, the devil who corrupted them all and taken away their humanity, and leave her behind to die? Maybe they were just pretending to like her. Maybe they were all just waiting for their chance to stop it, she told herself. You are driving yourself crazy. You are getting completely paranoid. You know that the others care about you, she calmed herself. A part of her felt nothing but the urge to run to them, tell them how much they meant to her and beg them to forgive her if they were unhappy. But another one held her back, knowing that this would be a bad idea. Acting as if she had somehow wronged them by turning them into devils might actually bring them to the idea to rebel in the first place. No. Damn it, you are getting paranoid again, she thought to herself. These were your best friends and not your killers in the making. Damn it. Damn it. Why did Gabriel had to show her this recording? Why, of course, to teach her a lesson, she thought, and as it seemed she had learned it even better than expected. She would concentrate more on the servants she already had, on her friends. She would show them how much she cared about them, not just show them. She would not end like this, she would not. Bucho. She heard Akino addressing her. It caused everything to her not to jump up in shock. Yeah. Yes, she asked, trying to hold the nervousness out of her voice. Is everything alright, Rias? You looked a little bit absent right now. Yes, everything is alright. I have only been a little bit in thought, she replied. XXX. As interesting to what's going on, another voice interrupted them. It was the mysterious exorcist who had so far only introduced to them as Gregory. Don't you all have a greater problem? Gabriel had after all brought you information about a threat to this world, even if her methods were a bit questionable. The question is, what do you do about it? They were all exchanging a look. We should inform Lord Azazel about this, Rainer stated. He will deal with Kokabiel and his group. We should also go and do something by ourselves, Gabriel pointed out. There is no telling how quickly Azazel will be able to react or when Kokabiel will try another strike. He has already invaded devil territory and kidnapped a high-class devil, not to mention that he was trying to have Rainer's team killed and blame it on Rias and her servants. We should try to stop him before he can do anything worse. Stopping him. Gabriel, as much as I would like to get the guy for what he tried to do to us. But Kokabiel is one of our leaders. He has 10 wings. Even with our new abilities there is no way that we can beat him, Calawarner pointed out. And Sartale will probably be there as well, and very likely a small army of his followers and hired guns. As much as I hate to admit it, but she is right, Rias admitted. Even after our training I doubt that even all of us together could beat Kokabiel alone, even less him and his troops. A good point, Calawarner, but you oversee one thing, Gabriel replied. We have Odin here on our side. She pointed to her fellow guardian who was at the moment wearing a gray-colored cloak and had the hood over his head. If he comes with us he can take Kokabiel quite easily. And I am sure we will be more than enough to deal with his followers. Oh well, Calawarner replied, before a grin formed on her face. Then let us go, Donasek stated. I cannot wait to make the bastard pay for his betrayal. But wouldn't we interfere directly into fallen angel business then? Irina questioned. In case you have not noticed, we are fallen angels, Rainer responded, and Lord Azazel has sent us to this group specially to deal with this matter. Of course. But, don't worry, I still think we should report this to him. In fact, I will send him a message right now, she said. Rainer, the voice of reason. Who would have thought? Calawarner commented. What about you two? Issei asked Irina and Zenobia. We are part of the team, Irina answered, right Zenobia? Her partner just nodded. I will come as well. All of them were looking a bit surprised at the source of the voice. It was Yuto Kiba. I want to stop them as well. And I won't let you do this alone, he said, looking directly at Zenobia. How a few of them noticed. The exorcist seemed to have a light blush on her face. Kiba, Rias questioned. I have to go, Bucho. If they really try to restart the Holy Sword project, then I have to stop it. I have to. You know what they have done to me in the past. Please don't try to stop me. I won't. Actually, I wanted to say that we will all come with you, she told him. This caused the others to look at her a bit surprised. Don't look at me like that, Rhea stated. If they are holding a high-class devil captive and try to restart the Great War, it is our concern as well, right? Not to mention that these people here became more or less our comrades during the last weeks. So I can also take a break from being a self-centered devil, for a short time, don't you think? What about the raiding game? Akino asked her. This will be over long before it starts, in one way or the other. And if I die, well, then it is Razor's problem, right? After all, he can't have a wedding without a bride, she said in an attempt of gallow humor. Issei's eyes turned to Murayama. You don't even need to look at me like that, she stated. If these guys are trying to start a war that could destroy us all, I will try to help. Don't even try to talk me out of it. I may have no real combat experience, but I know how to use a sword. I am getting a grip on my new powers and I have spent the last 2 weeks training like hell. I can help. If that guy will be there, I am going with you as well, alternate Issei exclaimed. All eyes turned to him. And if you are going, I am coming too, Irina's counterpart stated. You two are not even part of our group, Zenobia reminded them. That doesn't matter to me. This guy had murdered my friends, even if some of them might had their mistakes, he said looking at Rias, he had killed Asia's father and possibly her mother too. I won't just let him get away with this. I will avenge them. Okay, Issei said. And I am coming as well, they heard another voice. It was Asia. She had so far stayed silent during the entire conversation. Asia, it will be extremely dangerous, Issei told her. This will be the strongest opponents we have ever faced and we already have Rainer with us who possess the Twilight healing as well, so you don't need to worry about us. You think that is the only reason I want to go? Asia asked him angrily. This man had murdered my parents. It was because of him that I grew up an orphan. He had even killed another version of me and her friends. I am going because I want to see him die, she exclaimed. Asia, Issei said in shock. This is not like you, Zenobia stated. You think so? Asia responded. Yes, I guess it is not. She closed her eyes for a moment. But what do you expect? You have heard it all. And it is not only this, she reminded them all. Rainer here had wanted to remove my sacred gear, knowing perfectly that it would kill me. She pointed at the fallen angel and her 2 comrades. They even run tests on me to find out the best way to do it. The 3 fallen angels were looking at her, showing actual regret. Then I found out that this Diodora Astaroth person had tricked me and caused me to be excommunicated from the church. All that just because he wanted to turn me into a sex slave, and not only that, that asshole Fried wanted to have his turn on me as well. The former holy maiden had certainly learned a few words in the time she had spent with all of them, a few of them noticed. And if all that had not been enough, now I find out this, she continued. Can you tell me why it is always me? Why? Do I have a shield somewhere on me that says come and abuse me? The small blonde screamed at them all. I have enough of it all. I just can't take it anymore. Issei walked forward and wrapped his arms around her. Tears were flowing down from her eyes. The other Issei felt the urge to do the same thing, but then held himself back as he saw his counterpart already doing it. You know how sorry I am for what I wanted to do to you, Asia, they heard Rainer saying. They saw the fallen angel walk forward, right next to the former nun, and then, actually kneel down before her. I am sorry, Asia, she said once again. The alternate Issei could barely believe what he was seeing. If he didn't already knew that he was in a different world, he would start to believe it now. He felt in this moment a little bit of the hate. Or maybe more, he felt for this Rainer dying. Kalawarner and even Danasik followed her example a moment later, after sharing a short look with each other. Gabriel did the same thing, kneeling down right next to the other fallen angels. I am sorry as well, Asia. Please forgive me, she said as well. It is okay, she replied. As I already said to you, Rainer, I forgive you all. But what about the next idiot who comes and thinks he can take advantage of me, and the next? Everyone who thinks he can try, will have to go through all of us first, Rainer told her with a grin. Asia felt herself actually returning her smile. We will all look out for you, I promise, Issei told her. Yes, you might be a short little nun, but you are our short little nun and nobody is allowed to harm you anymore, Zenobia stated. Ah, thank you, Asia replied, a bit unsure how to take this. I will stay here and continue my task. Just in case some of your enemies might think they can get to you by going after the people close to you, the exorcist named Grigori said to them. But for the next battles you will have to do it by yourselves. I cannot stay here much longer. There are other duties I have to attend to. Now then, it was a pleasure to meet you Issei Hyodo and the others of course as well. You are not quite what I expected, but not in a bad way. Why? Who exactly are you anyway? Issei asked. Oh, have I not formally introduced myself yet? Grigory Jefimovich Rasputin, he said. The infamous Russian priest and wonder healer. Zenobia asked. The one who is said to have seduced hundreds of women, having healed the son of the Tsar multiple times and influenced to Russian politics. The first statement had caused a grin to appear on Issei's face. At least the version from my home universe, he replied. I assure you however that only half of the stories they have told about me are true. Well, that means of course that the other half is true, he stated with a grin forming on his face. You look quite different from how I would have imagined you, Zenobia commented. When I became immortal, I decided I wanted to look younger as I had been during my well-known years, he answered. Basically, had no interest to be recognized by everyone. So you have not truly seduced hundreds of women, Father Grigory? Irina questioned. Oh, I actually meant that the stories about the political influence I had was greatly exaggerated, he stated. His smile was now nearly rivaling Issei's, who only lighted up even more, while Irina blushed a little. The ones about the women however, well let's just say some of them are not that exaggerated. I see, Issei replied. I hope to learn from your wisdom in the future Grigory Senpai, he declared. Irina blushed even more, while some others like Rainer, Akino, Kalawarner and Rias were holding back their own grins. Maybe in the future. But for now we have other things to do Issei, Gabriel reminded him. XXXXXXX far away on the European continent, Crossel was standing in front of the mysterious being that he only knew as the Accelerator. He didn't really knew much about this man, except that they had a few things in common. For one they, as far as he could tell, were both part angel from their heritage. He had seen this during their fight 16 years ago. Even more important however, they had similar reasons for their association with the Dark Order. Good and evil, protection and destruction. It was by far not that simply. The war was no longer just about these two opposing ideologies. The reason. Crossel addressed the young man before him. You have heard that the other side has a few new recruits. A fitting target, don't you think? I see, he replied. So it's a trap, for them. Not that I care much. I will tell the lords exactly what you have told me when they ask. Do that, Crossel replied. Now leave me alone. I still have things to prepare for my plan. Like I told you, I don't care much. But you, we both know the reason why we are doing this tasks for them, right? We have made, if you want to call it like that, a deal with the devil. I know that is kind of an ironic way to put it, given what you are. At least that's what it had been in the beginning, wasn't it? Why are you telling me things we both already know? Crossel asked him. By what he had found out about the world that the other came from, it was quite different from this one. In first line, in the aspect that the actual supernatural beings, just like himself, were far rarer in the Accelerator's home reality, at least in comparison to this one where there were countless of them. Instead there it was a great number of the humans who possessed supernatural power of different sorts, magical or other. Humans, many in his world would feel insulted about this. They saw them as an inferior, weak, powerless species. Crossel had never truly shared this kind of bigotry. Of course not, given that he was a fallen angel hybrid who had grown up in the Devil Society after the Great War. But he was still used to the idea that humans normally only possessed greater supernatural power through sacred gears or other tools. At least until he met people like Darien, Faust or the Accelerator. No shit, Accelerator told him. The only reason I am doing this is that I want the lords as far away from my world as possible. So I had agreed to do a few of these little errand runs for them, from time to time. In exchange, these assholes had agreed to stay out of my business otherwise. It is far from ideal, but it's better than the alternative, he stated. But when I look at you, I can't help to get the feeling that you actually like working for a bunch of omnicytical maniacs. Tell me, what exactly are you getting at? Crossel questioned. He remembered his fight with this being. How his own attacks were just being sent back to him and his opponent looked like he wasn't even trying. All that while Faust was just standing at the side, doing nothing but watching. It had all ended with him lying at the feet of the other fighter and the Lord, who then gave him his offer. An even greater humiliation had it been when he found out later that his opponent did not even have any real interest in the fight at all. No, it was kind of ironic. All what this being, the accelerator, actually, truly, wanted was to be left in peace, or in this case his entire world. It was absurd. He was one of the most fearsome beings Crossel had ever met, and he only fought to maybe someday not have to fight anymore. You have started to have your own plans, haven't you? The accelerator stated. You have become ambitious, haven't you? He broke out into laughter. You realize that the lords have only made us this offer because they wanted to toy with us. Your point? Crossel asked. Only that whatever little ideas you have might very well backfire at you. But like I said, I don't really care, the white-haired young man told him. If that's the case, you can also leave now. After all, you have the explanation that the lords wanted, right? Well, right, Accelerator responded. I wish you good luck, Crossel, and I hope you don't get yourself killed, he told him smugly, before a portal opened behind him and he vanished, leaving Alec Crossel alone with his thoughts. It was all going exactly as planned. Soon these new recruits of the Guardians would be in his hands, especially the new Red Dragon Emperor. Still, even he knew taking on all of them by himself would be foolish, even for him. And he knew he could not trust Kokabiel and his group to help him with his personal plan. But he would not be alone. He had just contacted a powerful being a short time ago, one old associate of his master's. With him at his side, it would be no problem to bring this group of beginners down. The only problem was that this being had asked for something in return for his help, something that he had no real interest to give him. It would lead to the end of this world after all. He thought about not going through with his part of the deal. But even Crossel didn't want to cross a being this powerful. He would then possibly have to flee from this, his home reality, and never return. But what then? When they lords would find out that he run away like that, and they would very likely kill him, possibly in a horrible way. They valued strength after all. And when they found out that he had agreed to a deal and then not kept it. In a nearly bizarre way, they valued honor, as well after all, even if they didn't understood the same thing under it like most other people. No, that was not an option. He would sign his own death sentence. But then, this reality was only one of many nearly identical ones. Maybe sacrificing one of them would be worth it for the realization of his plans, maybe. XXXXXXX not so far away, the fallen angel leader Kokabiel, while sitting on his throne, was holding the object his newest ally had brought to him not long ago. In fact, he was holding two holy swords in his hands, two fragments of the long-broken Excalibur. One of them had he stolen himself just a few days ago, the other. What do you think, Sartale? Recruiting our new friend is paying off, don't you think so? He asked his lieutenant, who was standing in front of him. To be blunt, Lord Kokabiel, I don't really trust him, Sartale replied. If he is Crossel, it very likely means that he has devil blood in his veins. That would also explain how he could travel into the devil territory of the underworld so easily. Really? Kokabiel asked him sarcastically. He knew that his second in command was quite racist when it came to the devils, even far more than it was standard for the fallen angel troops. But you are right, of course, he admitted. We cannot truly trust a devil, even a half-breed. But you have to admit, at least for now, Crossel has his uses. He brought us this after all. Kokabiel held up one of the Excaliburs. Stolen directly from the church. And to make it even better, he had made it look as if the devils were responsible for it, as he told me. By using his devil form in front of the priests without a doubt, Sartale commented. Perhaps, Kokabiel replied. But does that truly makes a difference as long as he is that useful for us? Still, when he returns, keep an eye on him. If he shows even the slightest sign of treachery, eliminate him. With pleasure, my lord, he said. Good. That should serve both. Keep a leash on his new ally in case he tried something dubious and to appease his overzealous officer. Besides that, with the appearance of the other group that Crossel had warned us about, it is better to speed up our schedule. Operation Second Great War is starting right now. XXXXXXX back at their mansion headquarters, the group of Guardian trainees and devils was ready to leave for their target. They were just forming a number of transport circles that would send them to the other side of the planet. Be careful, Gabriel told them, and remember, Kokabiel and this Sartale are not the only opponents to look out for. Crossel is also extremely dangerous. From his raw power alone he is in the same class as Sartale. But that is not even counting his key manipulation and his sacred gear. The sacred gear that you gave him, you mean, Asia pointed out. Yes, she said, ashamed. Every one of you who might die through it in the coming battle. It will be my fault. Everyone who he had ever killed using it, it is my fault. I know that. She looked downwards. Always think of it. Crossel possesses the power to control water. Even the water inside our bodies. He can stop our blood flow, or use it to rip you apart from inside out. He can extract the moisture from the air and create weapons of ice from it. All that makes him such a terrible enemy. Always use your own power at yourself in the way we have shown you, to keep him from controlling your blood. If you can't do this anymore, don't face him. Keep your distance. Moments later they were all gone and reappeared in a forest area in East Europe, somewhere in Bulgaria if they were right. It was dark around them, night. The scene could have been out of an old horror movie. Okay, where exactly is this castle you have been talking about, Gabriel? Issei asked her. By the information I have gotten from Crossel it should be in this direction, a few miles at most. But we could not appear right at the front door, they would have noticed us instantly. Good, then let us go, he said to them. It took only a short time until they saw the silhouette of the castle in the distance. They were close by, but none of them detected any supernatural energies from the building. It was obviously well shielded. Just like they were all hiding their own presence during their approach. After a few more minutes they came to a clearing in the woods, or at least something that looked like one. But all of them had somehow the feeling that something was strange, their senses told them that. They also realized that they were not alone. In front of them was a presence. It was a fallen angel, a single soldier. Issei made a gesture and they were all hiding behind the trees at the edge of the clearing. A few moments later the newcomer arrived, not flying as you would expect from a fallen angel, but walking. The fallen, a male as they saw now, was carrying something that looked like a large container. He walked towards a small pit somewhere at the free area, and through the container inside, something that looked like. That is enough, Issei said loud, now showing himself. Get him. Rainer and Kalawarner moved and surrounded their former comrade, who saw them and now looked for a possibility to flee. Kiba and Zenobia joined them a moment later and pointed their swords at their captive. Now they were getting a clearer look at what he had just thrown in the hole. It was just as they had feared, inside were lying two human bodies. They others followed them and stepped outside. What is this? Kiba asked the fallen angel angrily. Odin, however, was only looking around thoughtfully. The god made a gesture with his hand and a surge of power went through the ground, removing the highest layer of sand from it. Then he formed in his other hand a bright glowing globe of energy. What they were seeing on the ground made them all freeze in horror. It had to be dozens of corpses at least, maybe over 100, that were lying around them. This wasn't a clearing, it was a mass grave. No, not again, they could hear Kiba say quietly. Even Rainer and the other fallen angels were visible distraught. They had done things they were not proud of, but this. What is this? Kiba asked once again, shouting this time. But the fallen angel stayed silent. Wait, I will get him to talk, Issei said. You think you can do that trick with a supernatural being? Rias asked him, remembering what he did with Fried. I have grown much in the last weeks, Issei told her. Talk, he said to the fallen angel, while he snapped with his finger. This was not much more than a symbolic gesture anymore, but somehow it helped him to focus. What is this? These are the leftovers from Valper Galilei's experiments, the fallen angel began to explain. Leftovers? Issei questioned. Yes. Why? Kokabiel Sama plans to create an army of holy sword wielders and supernaturally gifted humans for the coming war. Just like Gabriel had told them, Issei thought. Where are they getting so many people from? Issei asked him. It can't be that so many just vanish from the places around without anybody noticing. Lord Kokabiel has an agreement with a group of human traffickers and slave dealers, the fallen angel replied. They are getting the humans for the experiments from all over the world. I see. What is your role in this? He asked him. I and the others are overseeing the experiments, assisting Valper from time to time, and we are charged with removing the leftovers, he said in a cold voice. And you are not feeling bad about this? Issei asked him. No. They are only humans after all, the fallen angel replied under Issei's power. Tell me, where do we find the devil you have kidnapped? Issei wanted to know. The fallen angel gave them a short description. Good, Issei stated before he released him, that is everything. Indeed it is, he heard Danasik saying before he fired a very concentrated powerful light beam at their prisoner, piercing him right through his chest and killing him instantly. Danasik. Issei asked him surprised. This scum is a disgrace for the Grigori and all the other fallen angels, he told them all. He got what he deserved. Look around here and then claim that you don't agree with me. He gestured at the countless human corpses around them. I agree with Danasik, Calawarner stated. We might have done a few nasty things in the past. But this here. Issei nodded. I understand what you mean. Then let us go. Rescuing that stupid devil and stopping Kokabiel, Raynor declared. What conviction, they heard someone say loudly. It was a voice they all knew. As they looked around they all saw the killer from the memories Odin had shown them. Crossel, Issei said. Oh, so you know about me. That is good, he stated. Next to Crossel however stood another man. He was wearing elegant but a bit unusual looking clothing. His hair was very light, practically white. Two of them, Odin and Gabriel, recognized him nearly instantly, despite not having met this version of him in person. Loki, Gabriel whispered. This changed things, both of them knew. Odin might be able to deal with Kokabiel easily, but him and the counterpart of his son. They weren't sure. Another question was, what in the world had Crossel done to bring a Norse god on the plan? You, Issei's devil counterpart growled however as he saw the man who had killed his friends. He was about to attack him and nearly lost all restraint doing it. But suddenly he felt Odin's hand and his shoulder and sensed the mental power of the god flowing into him, smoothing his feelings. You need to calm down Hyodo, he told him. I understand your rage. But if you fall into this kind of anger, you might enter the state that is known as the Juggernaut Drive and then you would become a greater danger for us than our enemies. Do you want to see your friends die again, this time by your own hand? Someone with R kind of power cannot simply lose control like that. I understand Odin-sama, Devil Issei replied. Father? Loki asked confused, now completely surprised in his own right. He knew he had recognized that voice, but there was no way his father was here. Indeed my son, Odin stated. He lowered his hood and a spear suddenly appeared in his hands, and a helmet on his head. If you want to know, I am actually the Odin from another reality, as much as this might surprise you. But another question is, why are you helping this man Loki? If you are now truly another version of my so-called father or just an delusional imposter, you won't stop me, the other god responded. Crossel here had offered me a tool that will help me to start Ragnarok and I won't let this opportunity slip through my fingers. I see, Odin replied. Issei, you and the others deal first with Crossel and then with Kokabiel. I will take care of him. Are you sure you can do that, old man? He asked him. Don't worry, Issei. I admit that my strength might have waned somewhat with old age. But anyway, I promise that I will try everything not to accidentally devastate the planet. What? Issei asked aghast. Was this old man serious? A moment later he sensed how Odin's energy literally exploded around him. Okay. Issei stated, you are serious. XXXXXXX. The clash between the two gods that followed moments later, was felt by supernatural beings all around the planet. Sartale, Kokabiel addressed his subordinate inside the castle, it seems that someone has located us, someone very powerful. We have to be careful, and proceed quickly. Yes my lord, he answered. XXXXXXX. Do you feel that valley? Azazel asked the young man who was accompanying him. Of course, he replied. It seems that things are getting interesting. They all were standing in front of their enemy with the name Alec Crossel, a former guardian who had defected to the other side and also a descendant of one of the 72 great clans of the underworld. This enemy, however, had just appeared in front of them together with an even more dangerous being, the Norse god Loki of this universe. Had Odin, the alternate version of his father, not offered to come with them, they knew they would now be in more than serious trouble. But now the two gods were locked into a fight with each other, and Crossel was left in front of them by himself. Alec Crossel, how they got to know this man, while vastly outnumbered, was still a very dangerous enemy, as Gabriel had warned them. Not only does he have the power that equaled a well-trained high-class being, his sacred gear and his knowledge about the combat techniques of the Guardians made him an even more dangerous opponent. They knew they needed to use their own energy to protect themselves from his power. Issei. Not the one who most of them knew, but the alternate counterpart who had arrived in their world just an hour earlier, growled, I will kill you. Still angry, I see. Good, Crossel remarked. I am sure my masters will have plans for you in the future. Shut up, he yelled. But then something happened that nobody of them had expected. You have not told me that you will bring someone else with you. Gabriel now addressed Crossel to everyone's surprise. What? Issei asked confused. I thought it was better not to mention it for the moment, Crossel replied. After all, despite everything, I could not just trust you blindly, my dear, no matter how much I wanted to. Gabriel smiled and took a few steps towards him. The others were too surprised to stop her. She took another step closer and he drew her in his arms and kissed her, right in front of the shocked audience. But like I said, I have brought them to you, Alec, she said to him. Very good. I knew I could count on you, my angel, Crossel told her, smiling. You did what? Issei called out. You see, Crossel turned to them. I was able to locate her during her last trip through the dimensions. To be honest, I had a feeling that she would try to see the last world I had visited, he told them smugly, with a side glance to Devil Issei. So I was ready, waiting for her. As you can imagine, we had much to talk about. But in the end, she was able to see reason. Oh yes, I was, beloved, Gabriel replied, giving him a warm smile. I admit it took me a long time, but in the end I realized that you made the right decision. And it took me only 15 years, right? She remarked with some sarcasm. No time at all, darling, he told her. I always knew that sooner or later you would see things my way. But to be honest, you have chosen exactly the right moment, he grinned, now that you have handed an entire group of new wannabe guardians over to me. You sold us out, Irina asked, unbelieving. Why should I stay with an organization where I will always only be in the lower ranks? Why should I kept protecting people who didn't even knew about me and would never thank me? Gabriel asked, turning to them. Why should I stay separated from my love for ideal that had never brought me anything? I thanked you. I thought you were our friend, Asia shouted at her. The little outcast holy maiden, who was either used or thrown away by anyone in her life so far, she said coldly. Aren't I lucky? She commented mockingly. A good choice, my dear. With me you can be a queen, Crossel told her. As long as we can make sure that both sides are occupied with each other, we have room to do whatever we want. We can take control of one of the many variations of this reality and rule it together. You fucking bitch, Issei's alternate self pressed out, no longer holding his rage back. I knew you fallen angels could not be trusted. Hey, don't blame us for this, Rainer responded dryly. This is all her doing. She couldn't help it, but even she was shocked and, she admitted, a bit hurt by this. After the other fallen angel had kept her from killing an innocent girl for a sacred gear and make the greatest mistake in her life, she had as well come to see her as a friend, even if she was not the type to talk about something like that loudly. And now she was doing this. Issei's counterpart was more than just ready to attack both Crossel and Gabriel right now. I will kill you both, he shouted. The boosted gear appeared on his arm with his shout. Really? Crossel asked him. Before Issei's counterpart even fully understood what has happened, he was being attacked. But not from the two enemies in front of him like expected, but from the side. It was his senses and his instincts alone that saved him from the sword strike directed at him, from the person who was standing right beside him. He barely managed to use the just materialized sacred gear on his left underarm to block it. None of them had seen it coming, of course not. How could they have? Irina? He questioned in complete horror. His childhood friend, the single girl beside Asia who he thought he could completely trust, had just tried to murder him. Why? Why? Damn it, he asked himself. In this short moment all of it was coming up inside of him again, the pain, the hate. First Rainer, then Rias and the others, and now this Gabriel girl. How could he have ever thought that Irina, that any girl, could be trusted? His rage grew even more. But only for a short moment. XXX partner. Issei heard Diedrag's voice in his mind. You should be careful. Your counterpart seems close to the edge. Odin has warned you what might happen when the anger of one of you becomes too great. Of course, and the presence of two of him had also practically doubled that risk, Issei realized. XXX. What are you doing? The native, Irina shouted at her double. I can't control myself, alternate Irina shouted. I am sorry, Issei, she called out as her body made another movement to strike him down. But this time she was stopped by the other Irina whose sword clashed with her own. Alex's power is controlling the blood in her body. It is controlling her, Gabriel explained. I have warned you. You can resist it to some level through the basics of key control you have learned. She smiled. Of course, that is it, Zenobia shouted. Devil Issei felt an incredible relief in this moment. Irina had not betrayed him. How could he have ever believed that? Stop this, he yelled at Crossel. Now why would I? After all, you just wanted to kill both me and Gabriel, right? He replied sardonically. Zenobia joined her partner and together they were attempting to take her controlled counterpart down without actually harming her. No matter how powerful you are, you cannot hope to beat all of us, Rias told him. Her peerage was taking position behind her. Give up. You really think so? He asked. 6 wings materialized on Crossel's back, 4 of a fallen angel and 1 pair of a devil. He was now showing his full power to them and they admitted it was impressive. Out of all of them they believed, only Issei would have a chance to beat him 1-to-1. I see you have learned to use your energy to counter my power. I can actually feel you resisting. But you are all mere beginners. How long do you think you can keep this up? Crossel asked them. Enough of this, Issei's counterpart shouted, activated his balance breaker and charged flying at Crossel, who blocked his attack with a large light spear that he formed. Impressive, he commented. Diedrag's power is to some level protecting you from my sacred gear, even when you were not trained for it. But it is not perfect. He concentrated his powers to push Devil Issei backwards and threw him right through a line of trees. You bastard, Akeno shouted and sent a wave of lightning at him, but he shielded himself and seemingly shrugged her assault off. In return he formed a barrage of ice spears out of the moisture in the air and sent them flying at the members of the Grimoire peerage. They were joined by several light spears that he conjured as well and sent them at the devils from a different angle. While Rias herself, Kiba and Akeno were able to dodge, Kaneko was hit in the arms and legs, and Asia was now trying to reach her to heal her wounds. It had started to rain, under Crossel's influence, and he was using the water to form even more weapons that he was using against them. More spikes of ice were growing out of the ground all around them, but were quickly shattered by Issei, Murayama and the fallen angels under them. They all understood now all too well why Nose Gate was so dangerous in Crossel's hands. Both Isseis were now activating their balance breaker to use it against this opponent. A dozen ice spears aiming at them shattered on their armor. XXXXXXX. In some distance the two gods Odin and Loki were now in a short standoff and staring at each other. Both waiting for the other to make a move. I admit you are certainly not just a cheap fake, so much is clear. Odin, Loki stated. But as you said yourself, you are getting old. I won't let you stand in my way. At the inside, he was far less confident. That damned Crossel, he thought. This was supposed to be easy. If he had known it would come like this, he would have taken Fenrir along. His father had always been powerful, extremely actually. It was only good that he was also a perverted fool who spent more time chasing women than actually care about what the rest of Asgard were doing. But this version, and he had not longer a doubt that he was, seemed more down to business. Loki formed a small globe of pure energy in his hand, which however in his palm turned into a wide blast that he sends at his father. The power would have been enough to depopulate an entire continent. Odin blocked it with his spear Gungnir and redirected the energy harmlessly into the sky. But they both knew this was just the beginning. Loki was now starting to conjure even stronger attacks. Odin was shielding himself, and the area around him, where he knew his comrades were still fighting. XXXXXXX the castle at the same time, inside the base, the fallen angel leader Kokabiel and his lieutenant had just finished their preparation. Everything is ready, my lord, Sartale told him. Good, he said. Each of them were holding one holy swords, one of the stolen Excalibur fragments, in their hands. Are we truly going on our own, my lord? Sartale questioned. Yes, we are. You have sensed it yourself. Someone is here, someone very powerful, very close, and very dangerous for our plans. It is safe to say that this being most likely came for us. Very likely the group that Crossel had warned us about. And even if not, their presence alone is a threat for our location, Kokabiel explained. You are of course right, my lord, Sartale replied. But the rest of my team. It is a shame actually, Kokabiel stated quietly. That we have to leave the others behind. But we need to act quickly, instantly, if our plans shall succeed, or it might be too late. If we took the time to inform the entire garrison and organize a retreat, the interlopers could have already reached us. Not to mention that they others will made an excellent distraction for them, Kokabiel thought. The greatest loss would be Valper's research, the army he had planned for the man to create. But he could not change it. But nearly all of your most loyal supporters are here, my lord. I know. They will die as martyrs for our cause, Sartale. Just like Donasek and the others would have if you had not been stopped. It doesn't really matter. After this day, Lord Azazel and the rest of the Grogori will have no other choice than to join us and go to war. And that is what we both truly wanted, right, Sartale? Yes, my lord. With his answer, Kokabiel activated a magic circle and teleported both of them out of the castle. XXXXXXX. Crossel, Rias called out. Tell me, why are you doing this? Wanting power is one thing. But making a deal with Loki for the end of the world. Trying to start a new great war. What in the world are you trying to achieve? Their fight had come to a small pause. Gabriel was still standing close to their enemy, having officially sided with him. But so far she was not actually fighting against them. It seemed she was still conflicted about her decision. Good, they all thought, partly because it gave them a small advantage and partly because they still hoped they could convince her that her decision was wrong. By asking this question, Rias also hoped to buy them all a short time to recover. Kaneko, for example, was just being healed from her injuries. She is right. This is your world as well, isn't it? Issei questioned him angrily. So why would you want to destroy it? Gabriel, how can you help him? His friend looked downwards for a moment, not saying anything. You still understand so little, Crossel replied. You all have no real idea of what you are getting into. Oh really? Then why don't you explain it to us? Issei exclaimed. As you were surely told, the lords, the leaders of the Dark Order and Ahriman, the force that is standing behind them all. The true god of darkness. They believe that destruction is the way to improve the world, that progress can only be made through conflict, violence and terror, and that everything imperfect should be destroyed. As you have probably been told on your visit at the homeworld. Their agenda is the creation of, in their view, perfect universe, or rather multiverse, on the burning remains of this one. And so they are waging their war for thousands of years. Worlds, civilizations, even entire galaxies and universes, all that is being destroyed if it is deemed not worthy. The Guardians, or whatever other names this organization is known by, were only created for the single purpose to stop them. Have you taken a look at their history during your visit there? I am sure they have told you about some of their battles. Let me tell you something, he stated. XXX. In the year 2025 in Universe 003 during the First Great Conflict, the cosmic dictator named Darkseid had converted to their beliefs and had joined the Dark Order as one of the lords. Under Darkseid's command and then their combined power, they started an invasion on the Earth of that universe. The Guardians teamed up with the local Defenders, a group of heroes known as the Justice League and an organization of cosmic peacekeepers known as the Green Lantern Corps. In the end of the battle, the invasion had been repelled. Over half of the Justice League had been wiped out. The survivors over the time joined the Guardians. At least 2 major cities and several smaller places had been destroyed. Over 20 million of the population died, and that was a victory for the Guardians. So you can imagine how a defeat would have looked like. The year 2697 in Universe 001, he continued, during the Second Open War between the Guardians and their enemy in their home universe, the being known as Vlad or Dracula arrived on a planet named Kerala. Not that the name matters. Not the Dracula you have probably met, but his counterpart who had joined the other side. He arrived along with only a small group of vampires and brought this world death. Normally a vampire of his type can only turn a virgin of the opposite gender. But the Lords have somehow managed to remove this limitation, and Dracula's followers were spreading over this planet like a plague. They first corrupted and then turned countless others, who in turn slaughtered even more people. So they reduced in less than 3 years a population of around 4 billion humans and aliens to under 800 million. And that was only because they were trying to turn people instead of just destroy them. If Dracula wanted, he could have of course just as easily wiped out the planet as a whole, but he didn't bother, Crossel explained. The true reason for the entire attack was to create an army of vampires for the war against the Guardians. As he finally left along with the thousands that he and his followers had created at that point, he left some of his former followers behind, who from then on ruled as overlords over the remains of the civilization. Until the Guardians found out about it and ended their reign of terror, about 20 years later. The year 2699 in the same universe, Crossel continued mercilessly. The Lord known as Faust and one of his compatriots were testing 2 rivaling civilizations who were occupying the same star system. They manipulated both sides to start an interstellar war with each other. In the end, they decided for some reason that both sides were unworthy and used their powers to cause the sun to go supernova and wipe out the entire system. And all that had only been part of a far larger conflict. During the years, over 100 worlds had been devastated or completely destroyed in the universes 001 and 002. In Universe 008 at its year 2001, on a remote planet whose name I don't even remember, a group of the Guardians had actually cornered one of the Lords. But before they had a chance to take him down, he unleashed a single attack that destroyed all life on the planet. XXX they all were listening to Crossel's tale in, as they admitted, horrified fascination. They had of course been informed about the past battles and the destruction. But not in this manner. Do you see a pattern here? He asked them. Whenever the Dark Order wins an important battle, they cause global or even stellar devastation. If the Guardians manage to stop them, it still causes global devastation. The Dark Order, that means currently 6 Lords, all of them on the level of a cosmic entity, hundreds of other very powerful beings, some of them rivaling Mouse and Seraphs from our world, entire armies of super beings, demons and other creatures who are under their command, billions of soldiers on hundreds of worlds, entire civilization, entire worlds that have fallen under their influence, some without even knowing it. That is what you are dealing with, Crossel stated. Do you really think if they truly attacked us, our worlds, our realities would have a chance? Even if the Guardians would win the battles, from your precious civilizations would be nothing left but ash. I realized this a long time ago. So I agreed to a deal. So you are helping these monsters now instead of fighting them, alternate issei accused him. You know he is right, Gabriel stated, who was standing right behind Crossel now. If our worlds ever became a battlefield, even a victory might be barely better than a defeat. What Alec does is the only way. The best way. Murdering countless people. You. Just shut up. Issei growled. You have betrayed us all. Don't even talk to me anymore. For a moment there seemed to be a flicker of pain on Gabriel's face. But then it was gone. The purpose of the deal is to keep them away, Crossel responded. The Lord's attention is on hundreds of universes. I am spreading just as much chaos to keep them satisfied, and in exchange they won't start a major attack. My actions are the only thing that was keeping the Lords away in the last years. In some sense you could say I am protecting these worlds. Bullshit. Issei called out. If it was about protecting our worlds, why are you talking about ruling them? And what is the point of giving Loki a tool that could start Ragnarok? Rias asked him. Who said that I actually intend to give it to him? So you plan to betray him as well? Akino questioned. If I can. Should I have no other choice, then, he shrugged, this world is only one of many alternate ones. Its loss would be acceptable in the greater scheme of things. You are mad. You are completely insane, Issei called out. No, I am doing what is best. And you, all of you, your entire world, owe me for my efforts. So I shall become its ruler in the future, Crossel responded. Let me tell you another story, one out of old times. It began long before the rise of the human civilization, and before the race of the devils like we know them today came into existence. At that time the archangel Lucifer, the oldest and back then most powerful of the seraphs, had dreamed about becoming equal to God. To achieve his goal, he made a pact with the ancient force of darkness. As a result of the ritual he performed, he and his followers became the first fallen. This was how the race of the fallen angels came first into being. But it was far more. Lucifer and his troops did not simply fell. The power of the darkness, Ahriman's power, the same one that the lords are serving many thousands years later, was literally ripping the divine protection from them and replaced it with something else, a dark and sinister energy. As a side effect, however, he and his followers were slowly starting to change and developed characteristics of demons. That is what the legend told at least. My ancestor, the first Crossel, was one of his followers. Lucifer himself became a vessel for this dark force, an incarnation of the darkness. He tried to take over heaven for his own goals. Michael led the other angels and faced them in a great battle. And somehow, with the backing of God, they managed to defeat them and banish them from heaven. The extra powers they had gained through the pact with the darkness, was stripped from them and they fled to the underworld. Lucifer himself, at the end of the battle, was a shadow of what he once had been. His wings burned, his body damaged and the presence of the darkness taken from him, at least in our universe. I have heard in others, he was able to keep that power. But slowly he was recovering. In the end, however, he and his followers got some luck in their misfortune. It was at that time that the early devils were fighting an ancient enemy, another breed of demons, for control of the underworld. Lucifer and his troops joined forces with them. Together they were able to defeat this enemy and dispel them from the underworld, leaving the devils as the one in control. In exchange for their help, the former angels were given high ranks in the new devil society and Lucifer himself became one of the four Mao. My ancestors, the Crossel line, were given the title of Archduke and became one of what would be later known as the 72 Pillars. That was until the so-called Great War, when my family was one of the first to fall from grace. And the others were all too willing to let that happen because they didn't like to be remembered that fallen angels were the ones who helped them to become what they were now, Crossel stated with some anger, looking at Rias and her peerage. Rias didn't even know how to respond to that. She had never heard this story before. No wonder, given the attitude of many important devil families. But there is another thing that even less people know about. The darkness that Lucifer conjured didn't simply vanish. After it lost him as its vessel, it created another one to be its incarnation in this universe. A far stronger one, before it returned its attention to other realms. This time not a possessed angel or demon. No, something completely else, something worse. A creature, a beast of pure chaos that existed only to destroy and kill. A beast that still exists, in hibernation somewhere, and I have ways to wake it. And as soon as I learn how to control it, I will use it to destroy everyone who stands in my way and it will leave me as sole ruler of this world. The devils will pay for ever spurning my family, the Grigori will regret labeling us abominations and denying our existence, the Guardians and the Dark Order will be too busy with each other to do anything. Enough. Issei's alternate self called out. I have enough of your stories, your insane plans and your stupid self-justifications. I will take you down. You will not awaken any world-destroying monsters because I will kill you here and now. Oh really? Don't you ask yourself, why I am telling you all of this Issei-kun, when it was clearly better to keep my mouth shut about my plans. In the end it doesn't matter because you won't fight me at all. In fact, most of you will have to leave us now. You think we will just let you go after all you have done? Issei asked him incredulous. Yes, I think so. Unless of course you want your hometown to be destroyed, Crossel answered. What are you talking about? Issei's counterpart called out. While we are talking here, Kokabiel is preparing to attack Kuo and completely wipe it out, Crossel told them. What? Rias, Akano and Issei cried out at the same time. So far he had initiated that small attack on your peerage, manipulated Raynor together with Diodora Astaroth, and with my assistance he had kidnapped a high-class devil from the underworld, and recently we have stolen 2 holy swords from the church. All that to achieve his goal of a new war. Stolen from the church. Zenobia called out. Holy swords. Both of the exorcists looked visible distraught about this detail. They knew this was another dangerous provocation. She and Irina had just managed to disarm the second Irina and were holding her in place, trying to break her out of Crossel's control. But now he intends to go for a higher level, something that the 3 factions won't longer be able to brush off, he continued. If he attacks Kuo and kills the sisters of 2 of the Mao who control the area, and as a bonus even destroy the entire town, then we will have this new war. And nothing will be able to prevent this. No, Rias said in shock, that. So if you want to stop Kokabiel, I fear you will have to leave now, Crossel stated. In fact it might already be too late. They were looking at each other. They knew he was right. You have been telling us this entire story just to keep us occupied and waste time, Raynor realized. You have just been distracting us. I see you have figured it out, Crossel replied. You seem quite smart, young fallen. No wonder Gabriel wanted to recruit you. But it doesn't change anything. If you keep fighting me, you will come too late to do anything about Kokabiel. I had not expected Odin to come along to deal with Loki, otherwise you would already be defeated. But you won't be able to stop me either. We have no other choice, Zenobia admitted. Right, you don't, Crossel told them. You will have to. But he was interrupted. Because in this moment a light spear was being stabbed from behind through his chest. And they all felt the power of his sacred gear on them suddenly vanish. They all looked at the source of the sudden attack. Gabriel. They all called out. A few of them actually in surprise. You. Crossel whispered, just before his body fell to the ground. I am sorry, beloved, but you have made your choice a long time ago, and I have made mine, the angel Gabriel stated. You have planned this the entire time. Rias called out incredulous. Not bad, Akano commented. As Alec had told me, he had located and confronted me during my last trip. He cornered me and gave me his offer. I knew how dangerous Alec was, and that we could get great problems if we had to deal with him. So I acted as if I agreed and waited for the right moment. I knew we might have been able to beat him together, but I could not let you all risk your lives, not because of my mistakes, she said painfully. With these words she was taking one last sad look at Crossel's lifeless body. You actually had me worried for a few moments, Issei told her. Never scare us like that again, Irina shouted at her. Oh please, her act was not that convincing, Raynor pointed out. I had actually been suspecting that something was off, at least since you were telling us all how unsatisfied you were with your position. Well, thanks for not disappointing me, she said with a small grin, her voice sounding less sarcastic than usual. Gabriel, you are okay, right? Issei wanted to know. I mean you and Crossel. You were once, well. I know, she stated sadly. But the Alec I cared about is long gone. All what happened here proves that only more. A painful expression came on her face for a short moment, a moment where she was no longer pretending. But then it was already over. I knew it had to end like this. But I didn't want to put you all at risk. So when Alec confronted me while I was trying to investigate, I thought I could pull a Raynor on him. With the last part of her statement a small sly smirk had returned to her face. You know I don't really appreciate you calling it that, Raynor commented dryly while crossing her arms. Neither do I, both Isseis said at the same moment, and exchanged a short look with each other at the strange situation. I admit for a fallen angel you are not that bad, alternate Issei told Gabriel then. We should deal with Kokabiel now, she simply stated. At least now we won't have to deal with him and Alec at the same time. Gabriel, not that I don't want to get the bastard for what he had done to us. But Kokabiel is one of our leaders. He has 10 wings, Calawarner pointed out. Even with our training I doubt that we have a chance against him. Calawarner is right, as much as I would like to get my revenge, Donasek agreed. Lord Azazel knows about Kokabiel's actions now. He will send someone who is able to deal with him, Raynor reminded them. All we need to do is hold him off until help arrives. We will do that, Gabriel told them. And not only that. We will confront him and fight him for how long it is necessary. And we will kill everyone who stands in our way. Issei, she said, you know both Darian and me had told you to act with compassion whenever you can and try to understand even your enemies if possible. But this is not one of these situations. We have been holding back against Raynor's group and the Grimoires because we knew they were at least able to change their ways and could be reasoned with. But these people have gone too far. You have seen what they have done, you know what they are planning. An entire town is at risk, and millions of lives in the war they are planning to start. Issei. The guardian Issei nodded. We are no longer holding back, he agreed. We will destroy these bastards with all we got. But in that moment all of them froze. No. They heard Gabriel whisper. She heard the movement behind her. As she turned around she had already a suspicion what she would see. Behind her Crossel was standing up again. I see you have made your choice, my angel, he told her. That is impossible. I have pierced your heart with that light spear. I am sure of it. You should be. Yes indeed, beloved. I should be dead. If it were not for one thing, the sacred gear that you gave me, he said. Quite ironic, isn't it? Its power still keeps the blood flowing in my veins and it keeps me from bleeding out. No, she murmured. It had all been in vain. Wait, don't you feel something? Kaneko, who was just being healed by Asia, called out. Indeed, they did. They didn't sense the enormous pressure on their bodies anymore that had been caused by his sacred gear. His using the power of his gear to keep himself alive and use it against us at the same time, Issei realized. Good. You are right, Issei Hyodo, Crossel admitted. Over time my powers will heal the damage, but right now I need all the power of my sacred gear to keep myself alive. But I still have my own powers, and it doesn't change anything about the situation, he stated. The pain was visible on his face, but he was holding himself. If you waste your time fighting me, Kokabiel will win. And if we let you go, you will recover and cause even more damage in the future, Irina called out. She was more than furious about all what this being had done, especially using her other self and turning her against her, Issei. Now that the power of Crossel's sacred gear was broken, her counterpart was free again. But both Irinas were very pissed off. Leave him to me, Issei's alternative self said to the others. I will deal with him. Go and stop Kokabiel. He is mine. This will be a pleasure for me, he said darkly. I will help you, Irina's counterpart stated grimly. And I will stay with you as well, Asia told them. They were all looking at her. I can heal you, she said, and I already told you I want to see him dead. You still have Raynor with you if you need the twilight healing, right Issei? We have, he nodded. Come, we need to go, he said to the others. Gabriel, are you coming? He asked her. I am sorry, Alec. I loved the man who you once were. But, she closed her eyes and turned herself away from him. You don't need to be, he told her, because I won't die here. I will crush these 3 insects and then heal from the injuries you have given me. And then, when I have achieved my plans, you will regret that you have not sided with me. Goodbye, Alec, she said to him and walked away, joining the others. You said you wanted to crush me, alternate Issei stated. Now it is your chance, bastard. XXXXXXX inside the castle a short time later. Issei and the remaining team were now walking, and fighting, through the corridors of Kokabiel's castle. At first they had been sneaking in, but had then been discovered pretty quickly, and had been fighting their way in since then. Before them were a mix of fallen angels, stray priests and heavily armed human guards, the same criminals that the captive fallen had mentioned earlier. They had separated into 2 groups, one with the goal to locate and take out the lab complex and free any possible still living prisoners there, the other to find and free the pureblood devil who was being held prisoner here. Both teams had an easy way in the beginning, only meeting a handful of guards from time to time. XXX But now that the group that went after the lab had reached their goal, they met organized and hard resistance, consisting of 2 fallen angels, an entire group of stray priests and over a dozen human gangsters with machine guns. Kiba used his sacred gear sword birth, to conjured several swords, that were levitating in the air, and used another technique he had learned to send them flying against his opponents. The blades hit a couple of human guards with machine guns who were blocking his way. Then he moved forward and cut down a stray exorcist behind them who was just engaging him with a light sword. Zenobia killed another one of the human slave traders who were working here as guards. Rias and Akino, using lightning and power of destruction, just finished off another 3 of them. As they finally entered the lab itself, having forced their opponents back, Rias, Kiba and Akino saw a small group of humans, in their middle a small-sized, overweight, elderly man, who was obviously the leader of the group of scientists who were beside him, 2 other men and a woman. They all knew who he had to be. Valper Galilei. This is you, isn't it? Rias stated as she and 2 members of her peerage were standing right before them. Around them the others were still fighting with the remaining fallen angels and their human allies. Zenobia and the alternate Irina were still fighting a couple of stray priests and a number of gangsters. Danasik was, in some distance, fighting another fallen angel and quickly overpowering him. After a few more seconds, he struck him down. Irina was fighting the other fallen angel and, like her comrade, was quickly winning. Their training of the last weeks was clearly making a large difference. One of their members, however, Yuto Kiba, barely noticed any of this. He growled at the man before him. For a moment, Galilei seemed more than distraught and somewhat afraid of seeing them here. But then he pretty quickly caught himself. The 3 devils were staring in silent horror at the 5th and last human being before them. It was a young girl, maybe 15 or 16 years old. Tubes were injected into her arms and legs. The expression on her face was completely apathetic. One of Galilei's colleagues was just about to give her a shot of a syringe filled with some kind of liquid. They didn't want to think about what they must have done to this girl. Now, a group of devils, what a surprise, and a couple of exorcists with them, and also a fallen angel. Who would have thought? The man who they knew must be Valper Galilei addressed them, completely casually at the outside. What do we owe this surprise? Shut up. Kiba yelled at him and punched him in the face. The other 3 scientists looked visibly afraid. Valper, however, actually looked smugly. You seem to be angry at me. Why is that? He asked Kiba. You dare to ask me that? He screamed at him. The polite and soft-spoken Yuto Kiba they all knew was completely gone now. Look around you. I was. He tried to speak, to tell this monster about his past, but standing here before the tormentor of his childhood, the one who had ruined his life before it even truly started, he didn't bring a single word out. My servant Yuto was once in a very similar situation like this girl here, Rias pointed out in his stead. You remember it, right? The Holy Sword Project. Oh, of course, Valper responded, his voice sounded nearly gentle and longing. My first great success. Success? Kiba asked dangerously. You have killed everyone, he shouted. Yes, of course. But it wasn't in vain, let me assure you. They all had sacrificed their lives for science and for the future, a future where everybody will be able to wield a holy sword, where everybody has that luck. Don't you think too that this is worth it? Kiba growled once again. He was barely sounding human anymore. He gripping his sword, ready to strike him down. You might think you can kill me. But believe me, you can't. Lord Kokabiel will arrive any moment, and if he sees that you have done anything at all to harm me, you and all your friends here will die a slow and very painful death. So how about you just release me and I will give a good word for you to my master. Maybe I can even convince him to let you go. What do you say? Behind them, Danasik had just stabbed his spear through the chest of the other fallen angel, who sank lifeless to the floor. I have to disappoint you, Valper Galilei, but I fear Kokabiel is not here, Rias informed him. And your other protectors are falling very quickly, as you see. In fact, we can sense him nowhere in this castle. So it seems he had left just before we came, Akino added, just as smugly as Valper himself had been, who now however started to look actually afraid. No, he stammered, that, Arg, he suddenly called out. Kiba, with a loud angry howl, had rammed his sword into the man's guts and was slowly continuing to cut through his body. Tears were clouding his sight, until he saw the life leaving his eyes a few moments later. Rias Knight looked down at the now dead body of Valper Galilei, whose face was twisted in a grimace of horrible agony, Then he looked around at the horror laboratory he was standing in and the still living girl before them. He sank down to his knees and slowly started to sob. A few moments later the fight here was over for good. Rias, visibly nervous, laid her arms around him to console Kiba. She barely noticed Zenobia coming from the other side and draw him into a deep hug. Are there any other captives? Some who are still alive? Rias then asked the other members of Valper's research team. The corridor, the last door at the right, one of them, the woman, pointed at their side. Thanks you, she replied. She raised her hand and fired her power of destruction at the three humans, killing them instantly. No mercy, she thought, just like they had said. There was only one question left. Where was Kokabiel? XXXXXXX. In another part of the castle, the other group had reached their destination as well. The prison cells. Issei watched as Rainer moved forward and quickly defeated and killed the fallen angel who had been guarding one of the cells, and he knew that it had cost her barely any effort. They all were trying to spare most of their strength for the confrontation with Kokabiel. He couldn't help to feel a little bit unsettled, knowing how strong she had truly become during their training. He kept telling himself that she had changed, that she was on their side now, that she would never hurt him again, that she loved him as much as he did her. But at the same time, deep down, he was also glad that his powers had become even greater than hers. XXX. On their way here, Murayama had been fighting one of the stray priests and actually managed to defeat him. While she was an experienced kendo fighter and had trained her new powers hard for the last week, this was the first time that she was in an actual life and death battle. She was doing quite good, they admitted. In the end, however, she hesitated for a moment. She had disarmed her opponent and had him right before her. She remembered the order no mercy this time. There was no time to take prisoners. In every minute they lost, Kokabiel came closer to destroying Kuo. But, for a moment she lowered both her weapon and her guard. The stray priest tried to take advantage of this and draw a hidden knife he was carrying with him. It was Kalawarner who ended the fight by stabbing a light spear in his back and send Murayama a small smile. Mercy and compassion are important, Gabriel reminded her. Issei knew she was repeating a line they had all heard from Darien during their training, but only if we can afford it. Not on the cost of other lives. XXX. What was kind of ironic, however, was that, in opposite to what you would think, they had chosen the groups in a way that the team that would raid the lab would include the devils and exorcists under them, and the one to look for the captured devil would consist in first line of fallen angels. As strange as that sounded, they had agreed with Rias that it would be a good for the peace if the group who saved the devil hostage would include as many fallen angels as possible. Less than a minute later they opened the cell. What they saw inside was a bit of a surprise. They captured devil was nothing but a very young blonde girl. She was wearing her currently very dirty hair in twin ponytails, and her obviously once elegant dress was equally dirty and ripped, and several admitted she somehow reminded her of Mittelt. Her face and her arms showed several cuts and bruises that probably came from beatings that she had received here. But otherwise she didn't seem to be seriously injured. The look that she was sending them all, however, was visible, afraid and full of terror. Of course, Issei realized, their group consisted of fallen angels and humans, so she of course thought they were with her captors. Wait, he said to her, you don't have to be afraid of us. We are here to save you. We are not with them. The devil girl looked at stunned for a moment, but then she replied. Yes, of course. That's because your comrades are fallen angels, aren't they? If you are going to torture me, at least just do it, she said bitterly. I am telling the truth. Look, he pointed at the dead fallen angel guard at the corridor. They may be fallen angels, but we are here to save you. She saw him as well. He was one of the ones who took a habit of beating on her because she was a filthy devil, as they said. You truly mean it? This is not a trick? She asked, still insecure. I swear, he said and moved his hand over his heart. The young devil actually gave him a small smile. He recognized her in this moment. She had been part of Razor's peerage. Issei, we have to hurry up, Rainer reminded him. Kokabiel is not here. That means he is already on his way. If you don't want your home turned to ashes, we have to go now. He knew she was right. Come, we need to get out of here, he told the devil girl. I am Issei. This are Rainer, Gabriel, Kalawarner and Murayama, he introduced the fallen angels and his classmate. I am Ravel Phoenix, she said. Are you related to Razor? He asked. He is my big brother. Oh great, Issei thought sarcastically. In this moment they got another surprise as someone suddenly came around the corner and the person instantly froze as she saw them. It was Mittelt. XXXXXXX. A short time later, the sky over Kuo, two beings had appeared a few minutes ago in the sky over the area. It was Kokabiel and his lieutenant. Both were heading straight in the direction of the town, or more precisely to the school that was at the same time the base of the resident devils. A few moments later, however, they were being disturbed as another couple of magic circles showed up on the ground beneath them and a group consisting of Issei, Rainer, Donasek, Kalawarner, Irina, Zenobia, Rias, Akano, Kiba, Kaneko, Gabriel and the newly freed Ravel appeared.